Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I actually managed it. I managed all my work stuff in a way that I was ready by half an hour ago. I immediately ran home, quickly changed my shirt because, yes, ladies and gentlemen, after a while, we finally have some hard hitting, new, big hardware announcements from Apple, and this is just the start. We are actually expecting announcements throughout the week. So today, tomorrow, and the day after. We know that because Apple has confirmed. Basically, Tim Cook said they're going to have a busy week. They also confirmed an event or an Apple experience for March 4th. I think that is going to be an event or an experience that basically summarizes everything that they will announce throughout these 3 days. And then they will give the press basically some hands-on time. Also assume that the reason why they think it's worthy of an actual hands-on thing is because partially like what we're going to get tomorrow and today are going to be bigger than what we got today, because today we got the iPhone 17e, so basically exactly a year after the iPhone 16e, we're getting a full-on successor with the 17e. No big redesign yet. That's probably going to be reserved for next year, but some nice value additions and similar things with iPad Air, getting some things that the iPad Pro had already gotten, like Apple's new in-house modems, and of course an M4 chip. I already see plenty of people in the chat. So first, I left the link to our Discord where you can talk with our small but very enthusiastic community. I already see Angelica, one of our MarkCheck Pro Max members, saying she wishes me good luck for everything. Thank you so much for that. Rosa, one of our long-term viewers, and Ben Veni, of course, now the number one chatter, number one yapper in the stream for now, saying he thought it would be later. I actually kind of knew it would be 3 p.m. for me in Germany. That's why today was super busy. I took the earliest train that I could, got to work, worked my ass off without like a lunch break, finished like half an hour ago, and now I'm here. So guys, if you want to support me, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. And if you want to support me more directly, leave a super chat or super sticker right in the live chat. That helps me tremendously, motivates me, makes sure that I can take a little bit more time of work for this. And of course, you can join our Discord. That's what the link in the live chat is for, but you can also find it in the description of this channel if you're watching it as a VOD later on. I also see a membership milestone chat from Steve, member for 16 months now, wishing us a great stream. Still at work for the next 2 hours, which honestly I would be too, kind of, if I hadn't moved my schedules around for this week. I even have a little bit more time than usual on Thursday and Friday, but definitely from today leading up to Wednesday, because this was very important to me. I really wanted to see how these products fare. I wanted to react to them live with you guys. So I'm very, very glad to be here right now. And beyond all the YouTube organizational stuff, the YouTube jazz as we call it around here, of course, hit the notification bell, because that will actually tell you when I'm live next, which is probably going to be tomorrow at probably the exact same time if Apple holds to their schedule. I should also note this is an Apple focused channel, so if you're watching this and if you're new to the community, please consider that we still cover Android topics. In fact, I do actually want to talk about the Galaxy S26 Ultra, primarily about its cameras today, but then over the coming weeks I'm inclined to look at full-on reviews as they keep coming out. So we do cover other technologies. I do know my way around Android phones and Windows PCs and other hardware. Carlo Ferguson joining the chat saying hi to everyone. I won't be able to say hi to everyone depending on how many people join, so I'm just gonna wink. But wait, not wing, wave. Sorry, that's the German word for winken. So thank you so much for joining. Whether it's live or a SVOD, it means a lot to me. And yes, let's actually get started. And I think a good place to start is actually the iPad Air. I think because it's a very straightforward upgrade, but actually has a few zigs and zags that kind of add value in a way that honestly, I'm not even sure if that is going to appeal to a lot of people. I think the iPhone 17e is just a nice device. It is very compromised in comparison to the regular iPhone 17. There are no ifs or buts about it. I still would recommend, if you have the money, get the actual iPhone 17. But if you have a hard cutoff in your budget, I think the iPhone 17e is actually pretty good, especially if you want to really stay in the Apple ecosystem. Maybe you buy it as a first phone for one of your kids. Maybe you're buying it with a heavy carrier contract, right? That brings down the price of the overall device. So, but with the iPad Air, there's always like this discussion: should you choose like a last gen iPad Pro, or maybe the last gen iPad Air is so much cheaper at this point, and it's only like one chip generation behind, that it makes more sense that way. So I think that there are actually a lot of changes, well, a lot by the standards of the iPad Air, I guess, worth covering. So let's start with what Apple has to say on their press release here. Apple introduces the new iPad Air powered by M4. Blazing fast performance, more memory, enhanced connectivity, and then Apple obviously talks about software, game-changing iPadOS 26 features. You can already see that Apple is, while I do think some of it will return, Apple is somewhat backtracking on their push that everything is built for AI, and this device was built with Apple Intelligence in mind. They're mainly focusing on the big banner releases, iOS 26, iPadOS 26, all that fun stuff. Benveni, no. That's a very important starting point. I think you can see it even from the initial announcement here. The iPad Air does not get ProMotion. It does not get OLED. It does not get a much brighter screen or anything like that. Basically, part of why Apple is able to just slot in a new chip, sometimes more memory, sometimes more storage, is partially because they know if you want the best viewing experience, even if you want the best speakers, that's where Apple pushes you towards the iPad Pro. In fact, you can go all the way up to like a 16-inch MacBook Pro if you want. Now, granted, that won't give you the tandem OLED screen of an iPad Pro right now, but by the end of the year, it will. So, yes, if you are a screen junkie, haha, anybody remember the YouTube channel Screen Junkies? I think they're still around making honest trailers, I guess, but yeah, they used to be way bigger than they are now. Not that I should be saying that, like even I used to be bigger than I am right now. But yes, no significant screen upgrades. Basically chip replacements. However, more chips are being replaced than just the M3. Let's actually see what Apple has in store for us. Apple today announced the new iPad Air featuring M4 and more memory. So this is important, and this is something that makes the iPad Pro, in my opinion, actually a slightly worse value than one might think. Because when Apple added 12 gigabytes to the iPad Pro, I immediately thought like, oh, wait, that means the iPad Air is probably staying on 8 gigabytes to differentiate them. I know the iPad Pro can be configured with up to 16 gigabytes if you're getting the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte storage options, but I was very firmly of the belief that Apple would reserve the higher memory amount for the Pros, similar as they have done on the iPhone. Granted, the iPhone Air actually also got 12 gigs of RAM, but the iPhone Air is $1,000 phone, while the iPad iPad Air is a $600 tablet. So you kind of understand why the iPhone Air would be getting certain things that the iPad Air doesn't. But yeah, the more memory is definitely the biggest surprise here. Not more storage though. So that's one of the highlights for the iPhone 17e. However, the iPhone 17e does not get a RAM capacity upgrade. Given the current situation on the market where RAM is like double the price to triple the price, storage is like 50 to 80% more expensive depending on what you look at, these are actually surprising additions, especially since I don't even think too many people will care that the iPad Air now comes with 50% more memory, to be precise. It now has 12 gigabytes rather than 8 on the previous generation. I think something like ProMotion, and I assume that's why you're asking, Benveni, would have just pulled a lot more people in. But I guess for those people, Apple still wants to upsell them on the iPad Pro. And in fact, if you think about it, you can get an M4 iPad Pro, right? A last generation iPad Pro, and it still will be basically superior in 99% of ways versus this iPad Air. In fact, basically the modems might be the only point of inferiority. It will actually have more performance because that M4 is not as much binned. It will have a better cooling system. So yeah, there are obviously still a lot of reasons to choose the iPad Pro. Most formidably, of course, that tandem OLED 1000 nit screen, basically one of the best screens in the world that you can get on a consumer product. With a faster CPU and GPU, iPad Air boosts tasks like editing and gaming, and this powerful device for AI with a faster neural engine, higher memory bandwidth, and 50% more unified system memory than the previous generation. With M4, iPad Air is up to 30% faster than M3. We can actually look immediately at that one. Results are compared to 13-inch iPad Air M3 with 8-core CPU and 8 gigabytes of unified memory. Okay, so they actually don't specify if they mean if it's 30% faster in CPU or GPU, which I guess it can kind of be both in this case, actually. And up to 2.3 times faster than iPad Air with M1. So obviously, if you're coming from not an original iPad Air, but from the first iPad Air with Apple Silicon M1 M series chips, that's your upgrade. I wouldn't recommend that. I think if you just want a better iPad and you have the iPad Air M1, you really should be looking at an iPad Pro, probably like a discounted last gen one, because those difference in like screen and speaker quality, they're just too nice in my opinion to give up on. Even like my M1 iPad Pro, like I have zero problems with its performance. And it has a mini LED screen and a ProMotion screen. So while, yes, it might not be the greatest tandem OLED screen that we have on the M4 and M5 iPad Pro, it still is a nicer screen than what Apple is shipping here. Now, the other chip replacements are the latest in Apple Silicon connectivity chips. These are the ones that we have already seen in the iPhone 17 generation and, of course, on the M5 iPad Pro. I really, really hope that means that N1 also comes to the MacBook Pro, because that was a really disappointment part of the reveal of the M5 MacBook Pro. If you remember, the M5 iPad Pro actually got N1 and C1X. Now, granted, Macs don't yet have a cellular option, even though that has been rumored for quite a while. But the N1 chip that supports Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6, the latest Thread standards and stuff like that, that came to the iPad Pro, but not the MacBook Pro. And now it's actually coming to the much, much cheaper iPad Air, which is a really funny distinction, in my opinion, a silly one and a bad one. Like, if you think about the starting price, right? The M5 MacBook Pro starts at $1,600. The M4 MacBook iPad Air comes with it comes at $599, so it's $1,000 cheaper. Even if you like spec it up to 512 gigabyte storage to make it more comparable, it's still close to just half the price. It delivers fast wireless and cellular connections and therefore support for Wi-Fi 7, empowers users to work and be creative everywhere, blah, blah, blah. We still got 11 and 13-inch options with not much screen changes, unfortunately, to talk about. Game-changing iPadOS 26 capabilities, advanced cameras. I'm actually not sure. Has Apple given this the iPad Pro? I've been waiting ever since the iPhone 17 family, like for the 18 megapixel center stage camera, because I think that's probably the best selfie camera you get in most consumer products right now. Maybe some Chinese ultra devices get close, even though they technically usually have still smaller sensors for their front cameras. Like Apple still, like I guess still, I mean, the iPhone 17 lineup is just half a year old, but it's still something that I would like to see to come to other products. For the iPad Pro, we were actually rumored to get two front-facing cameras, one for landscape mode orientation, one for portrait mode. And I was like, but why? Why would that be the case? We have something like, well, we already have center stage, right? But now we have center stage with so much more quality, right, as you get on the iPhone 17 devices. And we didn't get any of that. We got the old center stage camera with way smaller sensor, low resolution, and therefore worse quality. And now, obviously, given that it didn't come to the iPad Pro, I'm not surprised that it's not coming to the iPad Air, but then it's funny that Apple is advertising advanced cameras. But yes, there are all the usual iPad benefits, powerful app ecosystem, support for Apple Pencil Pro, Magic Keyboard. Obviously, it's not quite as thin and light as the iPad Pro, so all the main differences still stand. 11-inch version starts at $599, 13-inch at $799, so that makes it a $200 price difference on the iPad Air, whereas on the iPad Pro, it's actually $300. Now, granted, it's much more expensive, but yeah, Apple's pricing is a tad bit weird when it comes to screen size upgrades. For education, you basically get $50 off. There should also be like business deals if you get like a lot of devices, like in the thousands and whatever, but that's not for the regular consumer. Bob Burgers, Apple's vice president of worldwide product marketing. I don't know why the name doesn't ring that much. It rings a little bit, but not as much, I think, as it should. iPad Air gives users more ways than ever to be creative and productive. Powerful performance, incredible versatility, M4, incredible AI, game-changing iPadOS 26. Okay, Apple also made small ads. There's nothing crazy here. Now, important because I know I have a lot of chip junkies on my channel that really care about this stuff, as do I. I'm not saying this is judgment. DM4 here, to be more precise, is getting an 8-core CPU and a 9-core GPU. So it's double binned. Sometimes Apple tends to bin the CPU. Sometimes Apple tends to bin the GPU. On the Mac, they tend to, on the higher end versions, they bin both. But then on the base MacBook Air, for example, they tend to bin the GPU more aggressively than they do the CPU. On the iPad Pro, it was actually funny when they started binning the CPU a little bit more. Now here we get 8-core CPU. I assume it's 4 plus 4 cores with 2 efficiency cores disabled. We'll have to see if any of that is detailed. Guys, there are so many people tuning in right now. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share the video out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and leave chats in the live chat. Give me your opinion, your agreements, your disagreements. I love getting your takes. And if you want to support me directly, leave a super chat or super sticker. Consider becoming a channel member right here on YouTube. Sorry, I'll just give out that occasional shout out. Hopefully you get not too annoyed, but it's important for the YouTube channel stuff. But I try to do as little as possible while keeping a nice flow for the video. So again, that 30% faster. Now they're giving a 5. I assume that's Testing was conducted by Apple in January, February 2026. All of these devices, M3, M1, iPad Air, of course, still run. Um, they're limited to 8 gigs of RAM. Um, they they run iPadOS 26, so Apple should have been able to create very one-to-one comparisons, except for situations where the memory amount might be the bottleneck. Obviously, there will also be other differences, like potentially storage and memory speed, especially memory speed we know is a different spec here, but those are changes that also just come naturally with the newer chip. They just make sense, of course, for Apple to do no matter what. There it is. AI, of course. So importantly, Apple does call out Apple Creator Studio now with Final Cut Pro. Of course, you do get the somewhat gimped version of Final Cut and of Logic. On the iPad Pro, or not just on the iPad Pro, I'm sorry, in Apple Creator Studio. And I guess for these kinds of tasks, the extra amount of memory is probably going to be the most paramount thing. What is interesting to me is that the M4 iPad Pro actually came with 8 gigs of RAM, but when people like tore it down, they saw, I'm not sure if it applied to all models, but definitely some models actually had two 6 gigabyte RAM modules. So they effectively had 12 gigs of RAM. So I wonder if Apple just wanted to use 8 gigabytes for some reason to save cost or to really upsell people on the 16 gigabyte upgrade. And now they have accumulated enough of the 12 gig modules. And of course, these are slower than the ones that are used for the A19 Pro or the M5 devices. This is essentially going to be using 7,500 megatransfers per second, while the M5 iPad Pro uses 9,600 megatransfers per second. This is how this one ends up with 120 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, while the iPad Pro gets 150. With the 9-core GPU of M4, iPad Air supports second-generation hardware-accelerated mesh shading and ray tracing for incredible graphics performance, and it supports first-generation dynamic caching. It's M5 and A19 Pro that finally bring us to a new generation, or it should even be like... it should be second generation mesh shading. It should be a second generation dynamic caching and third generation for hardware accelerated ray tracing. M4 delivers over 4 times faster 3D Pro rendering with ray tracing performance over the M1, which of course makes all the sense in the world because M1 does not have hardware accelerated ray tracing. That started with M3. Apple sometimes advertises larger gaps than the real world provides. That because there will be other bottlenecks, like if you're rendering some kind of 3D graphic, some of it will be even like storage limited while exporting. Some of it will be memory bandwidth limited. A lot of more complex GPU tasks tend to like, first of all, they tend to like a lot of memory, but they also tend to like very fast memory, or at the very least a metric buttload of cache that's on your chip. But yes, this is more accurate lighting, reflections, and shadows. That's the typical hardware accelerated RT features. If you look, for example, at the game that recently came out, Resident Evil Requiem, which looks absolutely amazing on PS5 Pro, then even gets like path tracing features on PC, you can see that while you can have very good fallbacks for a ray tracing with like screen space technology, it is gonna look inferior to a well-implemented RT solution. Now, unfortunately, despite Apple's partnership with Capcom that has resulted in games like Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 7, and Resident Evil 8 coming to, in fact, not just the Mac, but even iPads and stuff like that. Despite all that, we still don't have a confirmation for Resident Evil Requiem on the Mac, even though though it came to the Switch 2, so it has an ARM port. It is optimized for lower level hardware, basically. But unfortunately, we're not getting it. Well, if we are getting it, I hope it's going to be part of an announcement with like the M5 iPad Pro or something like that. Sorry, M5 Mac, M5 Pro, M5 Max, MacBook Pro. I guess, guys, I told you I had a very long day today between like taking the train super early, getting to work, getting home super fast. Yeah, I'm quite tired. Benjamin is saying, well, we can assume they will release iOS 26.3 and 26.4 Beta 3 today. Yeah, I would assume so. At the very latest tomorrow. Then you wait to ask for something. Wait, what? Um, oh, do you mean like the way I'm kind of port bagging for Resident Evil Requiem right now? I guess that kind of applies. With AI, so a big part here is 50% more memory. You guys know that the larger a large language model, the better it kind of usually is. And there is a notable difference in what you can run from 8 gigabytes to 12 gigabytes. Now, Apple's own foundation models have not yet gotten a big upgrade, but you of course all know that Apple has partnered with Google and their Gemini models to rework Apple's own foundation model. So they're not just going to simply use Gemini 3 or Gemini 3.1 or whatever the Pro or whatever the fast version is. They're going to optimize it for Apple's own hardware. They're going to optimize it for Apple's own private cloud compute servers. And of course, they're going to make sure that some models are running through the cloud. Those are probably going to require way more than 12 gigs of RAM. But then they will also have models running on device. And thus far, all Apple Foundation models, of course, have to run on devices with 8 gigs of RAM or more. My hope is that while I hope that they don't suddenly start prohibiting AI and newer AI features from devices with 8 gigs of RAM, I do hope that they give us larger models that do the same thing but better on devices with 12 gigabytes. All-Star Gaming YT, does the 17E have a new main camera sensor? My big assumption here would be no, because I mean, we'll get to the iPhone 17E right after the iPad Air, but it is like Apple just calls it the Fusion camera. They say you can get 48 megapixel photos that are by default 24 megapixels, right? I would assume it's still the same 1/2.5-inch sensor, basically the same sensor that Apple uses on the ultra-wide camera and on the telephoto camera. And it is not, to be honest, it's not a huge sensor these days, even for telephoto standards. Even some ultra wide cameras on like Chinese flagships and the latest Sonys, they're like 1/1.3 inches. But I would bet that we are still looking at that same sensor. As I said in the beginning of the stream, I know some might have missed it, I think the iPhone 17e is a good device if you have a really hard budget cutoff. But even then, I think you should still look at like the iPhone 16 in discounted shape, maybe even used. At that point, you might save way more money. Obviously, if your budget is even lower, you should consider a 16E used or discounted or whatever, or you should even look into Android devices, right? As we always point out on this channel, this is an Apple focus channel, but we are not like an Android bashing. Like, I'm not a fan of Windows, the operating system, but I am a fan of the variety of hardware that exists on the Windows platform. And on Android, I can appreciate the software and the hardware, depending on, of course, the exact product we're looking at. So 50% more RAM, 8 gigabytes moving up to 12. Memory bandwidth increased to 120 gigabytes per second. That's up from 100. On the M3, of course. The 16-core neural engine is 3 times faster than that of M1, so this is going to be working with all these kinds of AI tasks. Now, of course, we do know that the M5 generation, the A19 generation, they have introduced a noticeably better GPU for AI tasks. Now, I'm not saying you should buy an iPad expecting to, like, the best environment to play around with LLMs and stuff like that. Uh, but in my opinion, like the Mac is still way better for that. And of course, if you really want more and more, then something like the M5 iPad Pro, especially if you get it with 16 gigs of RAM, that will help you even more. But then again, the iPad is way too restrictive to really play around with that. There are apps like Locally AI that allow you to run a certain subset of models on iOS and iPadOS devices, but it's not something like Olama that you get on the Mac. And of course, on the Mac, even on the M5 version, you can get up to 32 gigs of RAM. On the M5 Pro and M5 Max, it could be 64, 96, 128. Who knows? Maybe like 192 gigabytes of RAM. But yes, this is faster in AI. I know a lot of you don't really care that much about AI, but it's still worth bringing up, including stuff, of course, that now works in Apple Creator Studio apps, like removing the background of video footage with scene removal mask in Final Cut Pro. Benveni's saying, did you watch the trailer for 17E? They showed that you can ask and voice something in visual intelligence, and I don't think we have like this. Wait, no, I think you can, right? Like, if you click on it, I'm trying to remember. Once you click visual intelligence through camera control, right? Wait, how does the 17E access camera control versus like the action button, I guess? Like if you customize it to that, because it doesn't have camera control. Which, like, I understand that as a cost saving, but then there will be one thing inside this device where I'm like, really? You brought this from the higher end iPhones, but not something like camera control, or even better, something like a larger main camera sensor? So a faster M4 chip, obviously still binned. 9-core GPU, so that's 1 core down from the 10-core GPU maximum. 8-core CPU, so that's 2 cores down from the 10-core CPU maximum. Next is better cellular chips, and this is where we get basically the latest generations that Apple has to offer. Now, the C1 was introduced a whole year ago, actually, with the iPhone 16e. And now we have the C1X. So we do not have a full generational upgrade yet, even though the C1X is like way faster than the C1 and also like way more efficient according to Apple themselves. So it's funny that they just didn't call it C2, but I guess we'll get C2 and maybe even C2X with like this year's iPhones. Well, not the 17e, but I mean like the iPhone 18 Pro, Pro Max, iPhone Fold, whatever it's actually going to be called, maybe iPhone Ultra. iPad Air features N1, an Apple-designed wireless networking chip that enables Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6, and Thread. I always thought it's Threads, but okay. N1 brings better performance when connected to 5 GHz Wi-Fi networks and improves the overall performance and reliability of features like personal hotspot and AirDrop. Cellular models of iPad Air also feature C1X, also designed by Apple. I know, by the way, there's been like one report, and I think Mac Rumors posted about this, where like the C1X modem on some guy's iPhone Air stopped working. And people were like, oh, is that the beginning of a new gate for Apple, right? A modem gate, a C1X gate. And I'm like, guys, if this was much more widespread, then we would have known by now. Individual parts will fail. A chip will fail, storage will fail, modem will fail. We don't even know what exactly went wrong. Maybe it was soldered wrong to the board, right? It's no. So yeah, maybe the phone, like this person said, they didn't have an accident, but maybe the device fell, and in a way, part of the board came loose. I know that's like very simplifying it, but yeah, there are no widespread issues with either C1 or C1X. Now you can say you want something better, like Qualcomm, for example, today announced the X105 modem, which is actually just jumping up several generations in naming, because usually they jumped up by 5. So X70 to X75 to X80 to X85, and now they jump from X85 just straight to 105, not even 90, 95, not 100, just straight up like basically 4 generations by their usual branding. So in that way, I still appreciate Apple's branding more than others. This uses 30% less modem energy than the iPad Air with M3. This one is obviously based on an older Qualcomm modem. This is basically everything Apple 5G related before the C1 and C1X modems. We have Riley joining the chat. You'll have some catching up to do, Riley, if you want to become the #1 yapper in the stream, as you very often are. Thank you guys for finding the stream. It means so much. Whether you're watching live or as a VOD afterwards, I know because of time zone stuff, a lot of people like from the US will join at a different time than people from like India or Indonesia, which, believe it or not, is actually a substantial part of our audience. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Cellular modems of iPad Air allow users to enjoy GPS, which, of course, yeah, this is whenever Apple, of course, writes these entire paragraphs. Now, that dash might suggest it's written by ChatGPT. I wouldn't necessarily say that's impossible or some kind of other AI, but I might actually go back and see if Apple uses that kind of dash like writing style in previous reporting. I mean, it makes more sense for this kind of report than like a regular human conversation that an AI is trying to replicate, or like a high quality essay, but it's still funny. This is stuff that you kind of think about in the new AI era, I guess. You can also enjoy 5G cellular support, helping them stay connected for work or leisure all around the world. And with eSIM, users can quickly and securely add a new plan. Obviously, I'm a big advocate on this channel for eSIMs, especially on smartphones. I just want that place with the SIM card tray completely used for better battery, better cooling, or just making your device just a tiny bit smaller if it absolutely because why not? Like, I'm not against having some kind of device that still has a SIM card tray in the lineup, especially maybe a cheaper model, something that you expect to sell much more in developing countries. But for most of the world, especially the Western world, I do not get why Apple doesn't go eSIM only on smartphones. Obviously, iPadOS 26, we do not need to go through everything. We have covered liquid glass on this channel, its pros and cons, and how some people hate it, which I still absolutely don't understand. The new windowing system, which, by the way, one of my best friends recently texted me about how nightmarish it was to like not have a warning and basically be thrown into the new windowing system. I probably should ask her how she's coping with this. A new menu bar, Files app improvements, the preview app. Of course, beyond just iPadOS 26, there is new stuff from Apple, like the new Creator Studio stuff. I myself use, of course, Pixelmator, both the classic version on iPhone, because thus far the iPhone has not yet gotten Pixelmator Pro, but whenever, of course, I use my iPad or my MacBook Pro, I use Pixelmator Pro, which I have not put in my dock thus far. I should definitely correct that. Okay, and then the accessory situation, that one is pretty self-explanatory. There's nothing crazy here. And Apple specifically even points out iPad Air upgrades here. 12 gigs of RAM, that's versus every previous iPad Air having 8 gigs of RAM, 120 gigabytes per second, that's versus the M3 and M2 having 100 gigabytes per second, and I believe the M1 having like 68 gigabytes per second or something like that. We have the 12 megapixel center stage camera, that's versus the iPad Air with M1, but obviously if you have like the iPad Pro with M1 like I do, then you already had that. It's one of those things where I'm not happy with the final implementation, but I really dig the idea, and that's why I really hope Apple hurries it up and brings the 18 megapixel center stage camera from the iPhone 17 generation. Landscape stereo speakers, so that's a 2-speaker system versus 4 on the iPad Pro. obviously a bit better than the M1 version, and the 13-inch, because it just has more volume inside, helps with that. And if you're really interested in the multi-windowing system, just the extended multitasking system, I still have to come clean and tell you that these features work perfectly well on my M1 iPad Pro with 8 gigs of RAM, right? So to me, I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, you need 12 gigs of RAM for that, but for future growth, basically for future proofing, and if you're somebody who wants to play around with more demanding apps like Final Cut Pro, Logic, Pixelmator Pro, you are well off here. Of course, you are getting better connectivity, which somebody who does have a 5G enabled M1 iPad Pro, I really appreciate that, especially since it's much more efficient than anything that obviously that I have in my own M1 iPad Pro. And hopefully Apple just keeps improving on that. Riley's saying, gonna start the live from beginning with Mark Eminem to catch up. Thank you. Obviously, that's you got, whether you're watching fully live or not, you can speed it up and try catching up. I mean, for once, we are just 40 minutes in. Sometimes people join when I'm like 1.5 hours into a 2-hour stream. That would be hard to catch up to, but we are pretty much done with the iPad Air here. Now, one thing that really does stick out versus another $599 product that Apple just launched is the 128 gigabytes of storage. So, of course, you know that Apple recently doubled the base storage on the iPhone 17 from 128 to 256 gigabytes for $799. And for a while, it was actually unclear if the iPhone 17e, which is, of course, $200 less expensive, would follow in that path. Now, we see that the iPad Air adds extra RAM, but not extra storage. But what does add extra storage, and that's the best transition I could come up with right now, is the iPhone 17e. In fact, it's one of the highlighted features right on top of the website on Apple Newsroom. Man, my voice is so hoarse right now after work and everything. Oh. So, iPhone 17e delivers incredible value with faster performance, an advanced camera system. Again, they use that word with the iPad Air without actually highlighting any camera changes. But whatever. I guess that's just for people who might be new to smartphones in a way. I mean, there's still a lot of older people who might have like a super cheap, like $200 Android device as like their first smartphone and then never actually bothered to upgrade. S2's iOS saying, I don't get why people care a lot about 120 hertz. I honestly think 60 hertz is really fine. Well, it really depends, right? Everything is a part of overall value proposition, right? I think for the iPhone 17e and in the future, I would even say iPhone 18e, I think that 60 hertz is quite fine, right? Now, on the base iPhone 17, we saw that adding something like ProMotion definitely helped with its perception. I would argue that probably a lot of regular people probably reacted more to having 256 gigabytes of base storage, but I do understand the point. I still, obviously, like when I watch movies and stuff like that, I'm fine with 24 hertz or 24 FPS inside the 48 hertz container. I'm fine with playing most of my games at 60 FPS because even though the PS5 Pro can handle 120 FPS, the amount of actual high-end games that target it is pretty low. Usually, like, you can enable like unlocked frame rates and then you play it like somewhere between 70 and 90 FPS with variable refresh rate. I think for the 17e, something like 256 gigs of storage at the same price. And again, this is in the context of the RAM Armageddon or Ramageddon, whatever you want to call it, right? During a time when RAM storage, RAM pricing has doubled and tripled in some cases. Storage prices has increased by 50 to 80%. So I do understand what you're saying. Now, for the base iPhone 17, I definitely wouldn't want to take it away or anything. Plus, I would argue that ProMotion by itself, beyond 120 hertz, also has other benefits, like the variable aspect, obviously, that helps bring down energy while you're watching movies and TV shows that run at a lower frame rate. It helps keeps games smoother that cannot necessarily hold a perfect 60 or 90 or 120 FPS. It helps reduce energy, of course, by running it all the way up to down to 1 hertz, right? If you're like looking at something static, even while scrolling, that scrolling speed might actually be like the actual frame rate might actually not be quote unquote stable, but it will be delivered stably thanks to LTPO screens, thanks to variable refresh rate, plus, of course, a more modern LTPO screen, as we have seen on the base iPhone 17, can give you higher brightness all the way up to 3000 nits. Obviously, if you go like if you went with like tandem OLED on an iPhone, you would probably be able to get it up to like 4000 nits or something like that. If a 13-inch iPad can handle a full 1000 nits and then 1600 in HDR, yeah, that is going to be great. So there are other benefits that just come with a more modern screen, and unfortunately there are some spec points of the iPhone 17e screen and overall that I think still make the iPhone 17 very much well worth the upgrade if you can afford it. That is, this channel does not like poor shame or whatever that term would be correctly. Like, if you obviously need a cheaper product and for whatever reason you really are all sold on the Apple ecosystem, whether it's a silly reason like blue versus green bubbles or a more substantial reason like some kind of crucial app that you need only runs on iPhone, or maybe you're a big Apple Watch and AirPods lover and you want the most native experience with them. Even you could somewhat make them work with Android, especially AirPods, but obviously the iPhone experience is better. Okay, let's start with dissecting the iPhone 17e. It's a powerful and more affordable addition to the iPhone 17 lineup. At the heart is the latest generation A19 chip and a C1X modem. So this, of course, updates the C1 modem that we had on the original iPhone 16e. In fact, up to 2 times faster, giving it the exact same capabilities as basically the C1X in the iPhone Air. If you actually look at the lineup, the iPhone 17 and 17 Pro are still powered by Qualcomm X80 modems. But if you want Apple, you kind of, it's actually interesting because you get Apple's Wi-Fi modems as a premium option, and you get Apple's 5G modems as like the cheaper option, which is, or at least the much more efficiency focused option, which of course the iPhone Air is very much in need of the most efficient components it can have because it has a pretty small battery, especially with its 6.5-inch screen. Signal horn 2520, how's the battery like on the 17e? Well, I obviously don't know in real tests. I mean, we can actually like, I guess we can look it up, right? But Apple has not fully upgraded the website yet, right? Right? They have still the iPhone 16e here, which is which is very weird, and that's why I'm also mostly reading from the newsroom. Yeah, and you can even see I cannot add the 17e yet to the comparison page. So maybe Apple, like, and that's like 1.5 hours after the news came out. I guess I can look up the German website. I mean, the text specs should be like readable no matter what. Ben Winnie saying, talking about the Apple Watch, do you think they will do something other than chipset replacement? I was thinking of getting a battery replacement in a few months for my Series 9. I do not know. There have been always, like, remember how long we have talked about, like, blood pressure rumors? And blood pressure ended up a little bit more of, like, a software feature than an actual, like, hardware feature of a brand new generation. And, Now, with a chip replacement, we are definitely overdue for a very substantial bump, right? Like a chip that's actually based on like 3 nanometer and stuff like that. Oh yeah, Apple has not fully updated their website. That's actually quite hilarious. Uh, it was out but got removed. Oh, interesting. Well, that's. Well, I guess, I mean, I'm still going to be streaming for at least an hour or so, guys. So we'll have to see about the spec points. But this is actually a rare, like, Apple technical oversight. Maybe they made some mistakes. Like, if you remember, like, my Galaxy S26 Ultra coverage, the website still said 16 million colors, which would equate to an 8-bit panel. But Samsung themselves have said multiple times to the press that they're using a 10-bit panel, which should be supporting of up to 1 billion colors, as Apple has supported now for like 3 years on iPhones. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Maybe Apple made some mistakes on their website and they're now correcting it. But yeah, thank you guys for also pointing that out. I thought for a moment I was going insane. Okay, so C1X is 2 times faster than C1, 48 megapixel fusion camera. So again, we do not have I think if this was using like a 1 over 1.56 inch sensor, like the one on the iPhone 17 or something like that, I think they would have pointed it out, right? I mean, they branded with like optical quality 2x telephoto. That's why they call it fusion camera, right? It's basically a native 48 and then a zoomed in 12 megapixel image. I do not like that. I think it's somewhat misleading. I do definitely prefer having dedicated optical zoom or dedicated optical ultra wide solutions. But yeah, you're not buying the iPhone 17e for the best camera in the business, not even close. It's still a 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR display, now with Ceramic Shield 2, and that one is really funny to me because Apple is using this old-ass screen. We're gonna get to why it's old, not just because it's a notch display, obviously, but even in terms of brightness, it's so outdated. It's basically entirely based on technology from like the iPhone 13. But like they're bringing Ceramic Shield 2 that has 3 times better scratch resistance and reduced glare. So these are features from the iPhone 17 lineup, from the much more premium devices. So I guess just the mass production of Ceramic Shield 2, like it probably made sense. Oh, we have so much of it. Let us stop producing the older one. Let us just cut it into size for this version. But one thing about the screen, even though it's not brighter, at least hopefully reduced glare will help you a little bit with outdoor usage. But it should be noted, in the Android world, in this price range, you get devices that are easily twice as bright. With HDR, obviously even way more than that, but those numbers can also be misleading. Signal who are saying the 17e and the iPhone Air base model actually cost $50 apart due to a promotion locally. If the battery is better, we'll probably upgrade from my 12 mini to this rather than the Air. I like shorter phones. For $50 difference, well, for $50 difference, don't forget, you get an A19 Pro chip rather than A19 chip. So you get the extra GPU core, but you also just get a better chip in a way. You get a larger screen. Now that screen is ProMotion. It's much brighter. Unironically, so this same ceramic shield on top, though, you get the much better. You get a much better main camera, right? If this is still the 1 over 2.5 inch sensor, the iPhone Air gives you a 1 over 1.5 inch sensor. That's like twice the size, basically. Because don't forget that number is on the diagonal. So if you use the Pythagorean theory, right? And you know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and then you know a times b equals the area of that sensor. You know, it's a pretty big difference, and the selfie camera is just notably better. The main downside and you get DN1 modem. That's also very important. It's something that I haven't yet noticed and mentioned. The iPhone 16e might get the C1X modem, in fact, the one that we just discussed for the iPad Air. The iPhone Air has the C1X and the N1. So just like the iPad Air, just like the iPad Pro, the iPhone 16e, now we do not have tech specs, but my guess it's still stuck on the same pretty bad Wi-Fi 6 modem. Not even Wi-Fi 6E, definitely not Wi-Fi 7, definitely not Bluetooth 6, probably Bluetooth 5.3, definitely not the latest Thread support, and much lower efficiency. A big part of why the iPhone 16e, despite having a pretty large battery for its size, 4,000 milliampere hours or 3960 something, it actually didn't perform as well as the iPhone 16, not even the 17, with a larger, brighter screen. And part of that is because the screen, even before it became LTPO in the iPhone 17, it was always better. But then the Wi-Fi modem was also a big difference. Like older Broadcom models that are Wi-Fi 6E based are still better than the Wi-Fi 6 that you're gonna be getting here. Oh, Riley's already halfway caught up. That's nice. Why doesn't it have Dynamic Island? Well, that's so you probably are more enticed to get the iPhone 17. Again, I bring it up multiple times. That's not should justify any bad pricing or anything. But don't forget, RAM storage increases, RAM pricing increases, storage pricing increases. TSMC just bumps up the price for even older modem nodes. So, while yes, this is an N3P based processor, which is actually quite great in a chip in a device of that price, it keeps getting more expensive for Apple. They can use the same older Note if they choose to from TSMC, but they just increase prices by like 5% every year. Now, obviously, this device does a lot to cut down in cost, but it does less so than the iPhone 16e. The iPhone 16e obviously came with 128 gigs of storage. This has 256. The iPhone 16e didn't have MagSafe. This one does have MagSafe. And again, we are talking extra dollars while some prices keep shrinking, but that's on top of the other price pressures, right? So yes, if you want the best, even I would argue if you want the best value, you just get the iPhone 17. I think, for example, the iPhone 17 is way better value than the base Galaxy S26. But yeah, this device is not designed to entice you. Single who are saying, okay, we'll go for the Air instead. I would like the only downside to the Air, the only real world downside is I think its battery life will be still objectively a bit shorter than this device, because this one has like what, 800 milliampere hours more on a smaller screen and everything. Now that screen is less efficient, but it's a smaller screen at least. So maybe get like an extra battery or something for the iPhone Air. But hey, if you can really get it for like $650, yeah, like I would get that. Benvin is saying, if it isn't carrier locked, you could always say and buy 17e and have some money left. Yeah, I'm not sure how much resale value like a used or an open iPhone Air gets these days. I know even carriers sell them up to like $200 less. In your case, it would be like $350 under MSRP. I guess that also if it's like with a carrier, there are some subsidies involved. But yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, that brings me actually up something that I've highlighted to the next major feature. And before I do that, guys, we're about an hour into the stream. I love having you guys here. I love how engaged you are in the live chat. Please keep that up. On top of that, if you want to see more of this channel, subscribe to it. Hit the like button. That helps tremendously with the algorithm. Share the video out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Of course, beyond just regular chat messages, you can also leave a super chat or super sticker here to support me financially. That helps a lot, encourages me to live stream way more often, have much more in-depth discussion. Join our Discord. You actually find the link in the very beginning of the live chat or in the description of this channel. Maybe I'll even post it in like the regular comment section afterwards. And you can become a permanent channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max, Maximus, and Jonathan, our MarkTech Pro Max supporters. Or you can also go to Patreon and support us over there. Sorry, as I mentioned before, have to give out these small shout outs so newcomers know how to engage with the community. It's all very much appreciated, just you staying. With MagSafe, users can enjoy fast wireless charging and access to a vast ecosystem of accessories, large chargers and cases. This one was a pretty insane thing to leave out. And I understand that the E's will obviously have even some severe downgrades versus the base models. I do consider it like the 17, the base model. I consider the E basically the under the base model, even though in years past, $600 actually used to be the starting price for a regular iPhone. Like I believe for $650, you got the iPhone 6 base model. Stu's iPhone 17 website is coming back soon, just really messy right now. Okay, that one is weird, but I guess while we are going through the broader specs, right, we can then really dive into the deeper specs. And then afterwards, you guys can let me know what else you would like to see me cover. I do tend to stream for at least 2 hours or so. That way, anybody who joins like gets something out of it. I did want to look at SuperSaf's camera comparison between the Galaxy S26 Ultra and the iPhone 17 Pro Max. But of course, you guys are free to suggest something else. I can even look, did Apple maybe introduce anything else today? Okay, no. So we are stuck with those two new hardware reveals. Not that that's too little, right? We've been months without a big hardware reveal. The only thing we got this year thus far was AirTag, AirTag 2 or AirTag just second generation. I guess Apple didn't brand it in a very precise way. Obviously, MagSafe has been around since the iPhone 12 days. So its removal on the iPhone 16e was quite surprising because the costs for it are very minimal nowadays. Obviously, after years of investing in it, it also really hurt its position inside the Apple ecosystem. Unlike if you guys know me, I hate the fact that the Galaxy S26 Ultra, a $1,300 product, does not come with Qi 2 enabled magnets. You basically have to get a case with magnets, but at least you could get a case with those magnets, and it still supports relatively fast 25-watt wireless charging. The iPhone 16e had regular wireless charging, so that's basically a spec point from the iPhone 8, 10, and 10R, 10S, and 11, right? Ever since then, iPhone 12 and up had better stuff thanks to MagSafe. And because it didn't have the magnets for alignment, Apple only rated it up to 7.5 watts of wireless charging, which is of course way slower than any MagSafe device before, half than the slowest ones, and obviously the fastest ones get up to 25 watts, so that's a 3x gap. I'm really glad that Apple is doing that. When obviously Apple still brings up emergency SOS, roadside assistance. These are not new features, but Apple always brings them up because they're quite essential. KSB Wonder saying, yo, hi to KSB. I actually have seen you. I believe in the last, I think you joined for the Galaxy S26 reveal stream, didn't you? Available in 3 elegant colors with a premium matte finish, black, white, and the new beautiful soft pink, which is interesting. Like, I can even like, I see this soft pink, but this soft pink is exactly what triggers like my small color blindness. I see that it's pink, but in the wrong light, this will just immediately just look like white and silver to me. Here it's actually quite pronounced on this specific image, but I've seen even some other images where it just doesn't look quite that. And Riley has officially caught up fully with us and is now once again the #1 yapper in our live chat. So I guess anybody who wants to overtake him would need to send like a super chat or something. So it's still the same $5.99, and it becomes available on March 11th. So starting this Wednesday, you'll be basically able to order it on March 4th, and a week after that, it'll become available on March 11th. I would assume that means that by March 9th or 10th, we would be getting some first reviews. And of course, even what Apple put in the title of or the subtitle of this video is 256 gigabytes for the same $5.99. They also bring up some, of course, generational comparison. That's 4 times more than the iPhone 12 used to give. I believe the iPhone 12 actually started at $6.99. Or what's the iPhone 12 actually? $7.99. Because the iPhone 12 mini, I think, was $6.99, right? So over the time, that's still iPhone 12. I forgot the P. 12 MSRP. These are Euro prices. AI. That's something that AI is usually quite good at. The iPhone 12 had an official MSRP at $7.99 for the 64 gigabyte model, though many users paid $8.29. Oh, right, that was basically like the upcharge because Qualcomm prices are quite crazy, and without carrier subsidies, Apple actually sold it for a while for a higher price. It's insane that the iPhone 17 now obviously has 4 times more storage, a larger, brighter dynamic island screen with ProMotion and everything, and it's actually in a way cheaper because even if you get the carrier unlocked version, you get $7.99. And obviously the iPhone 12 also had, like, even for its time, a not great amount of memory. We can criticize the iPhone 17 for having 8 gigs of RAM, not even like 10 or not 12 like the Pros. But this one had 4 gigs of RAM, while the 12 Pro, which didn't offer that much, had 6. And I think that this would have been a good year to just offer 6 across the board. And then by the time the iPhone 14 came out, the Pros should have gotten 8 gigabytes rather than sticking with 6 for years and years. So in a way, AI, like it or not, actually pushed Apple to give us first more RAM and now more storage. Because don't forget, part of why we're getting more storage is because Apple wants us to preload all those large language models that are necessary. And that can be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 gigabytes, whatever, right? Even more as those models increase in size and they get optimized for devices with larger memory footprints. So I think that whenever you see that meme online, it's like, oh, it's the same iPhone, but more expensive this year. That has not happened in years and years. Like, realistically, we've only seen like price price reductions or like price adjustments whenever there was like a crazy difference in money exchange, right, between euro and the dollar, or the Japanese yen and the dollar and stuff like that, right? Currency exchange rates fluctuations. KSP1 is saying, Riley, hang on, I'm coming for you. Oh, KSP, you're also not caught up, but thank you still for chatting in the live chat. In a year where RAM and storage prices have skyrocketed, Apple is keeping the other specs the same, but upgrading RAM and storage. Yes, which you also need to understand, this has been in the planning for way longer. There might be a chance that if Apple used 128 gigabytes, they would have to have the amount of storage modules, and then this would probably have the slowest storage in years in iPhones. Or if this uses only one module, which I don't think it does, they would have to now start sourcing 128 gigabyte modules. which also wouldn't really make sense logistically. You just save more money by mass ordering more of the same. Um, and yeah, in that way, I'm actually quite happy. But obviously, yes, we really could have used a dynamic island screen, right? Not even necessarily needing to push it to like 6.3 inches or something like that. Obviously, it would be cool if it had the exact same screen as the iPhone 16. Not even talking about the 17, obviously with features like ProMotion and 3000 nits of brightness, but like with those slimmer bezels and everything. But no, that's something you have to pay extra for, and that's what basically what you get for those $200. You get a better screen, you get N1 rather than whatever Wi-Fi 6 module probably is inside here. You get A19 with more GPU cores, but probably not that much of a real world difference. Especially if you're also trying to actually hit 120 hertz in games. What else are you getting? And of course the better cameras. You get the extra ultra wide camera, you get the 18 megapixel center stage front camera, and you get the much larger sensor for the main camera, which I think is worth $200 for most people. But yeah, it also depends, obviously. If you see like a carrier deal where there's only like $100 difference between the 17 and 17E, I think it's no contest whatsoever. I think you should then stretch your budget to get the 17. But obviously, if you cannot stretch your budget at all, and the difference is more like $200, then get the 17E, or even better, consider like an used or discounted iPhone 16. It's gonna be better in a lot of ways. Riley saying, guess there's always next year. Yeah, and there will be a year after that and a year after that. And I honestly doubt that most enthusiasts watching my channel are even that interested in the E. Probably most are around the base model or like a discounted Pro version, even like a discounted Air. KSP wonders a good move would be making the E series in the size of a Mini. The problem is 6.1 inches is such a good size that so many apps are developed for nowadays. I think what Apple could do, rather than give it a 6.3-inch screen with very slim bezels and in basically the same footprint, I think it would be cool if they kept 6.1 inches and made the bezels really, really small. That would actually bring it in size closer to something like the iPhone 10 or 10s, which had 5.8-inch screens, right? But thicker bezels. And of course, it would still make it noticeably smaller than something like an iPhone 10R or an iPhone 11. I always wonder what size an iPhone mini should even have these days. Because 5.4 inches just seems just too small, right? It would be hard to market. The only thing that I can really imagine is if Apple brings this up to a 6.3 inches, maybe there would be room for like the revival of a 5.8-inch screen, but like with dynamic islands, super slim bezels, and I don't know if they should even put mini in the name of that, but I guess that would be. But then it would also be a logistical nightmare, because part of why the iPhone E is so cheap is because it reuses older components. It's not just cheaper because these components are worse. It's cheaper because these components are older. The infrastructure that was built to create them has been all paid for, right? The utilization rate, the yield rates are probably close to 100% for a screen like this, right? That's what brings the price down. Just making the same screen but smaller, it could still work in a way, right? You just cut the panel to a smaller size, but it would still create a different logistical effort. And I'm not sure if there is enough of a market to justify that. With that, Pink also suggests to me that Apple is still eyeing this kind of device for like more kiddie market, maybe it's girls with smaller hands. So I do get your reason, and there are signs that Apple is looking at something like this, but the market has just spoken time and time again. They want bigger and bigger and bigger. Even the iPhone Air, which is like a little bit smaller than the Plus that preceded it, obviously it's a lot thinner and stuff like that. It just in many ways flopped. Now it has other downsides, especially for its price, so I'm not going to blame it exclusively on it being smaller, but it is part of the story. um, so yeah, Apple has a lot of vice presidents of worldwide this is specifically iPhone product marketing, not just product marketing. Kayan Druns, okay. Beautiful design with enhanced durability. So IP68 rating. Now that one isn't new, but thankfully Apple does not compromise on that on cheaper devices. So that's still water and dust resistant, and obviously with water resistance also comes splash resistance. It's aerospace grade aluminum. It's just aluminum. There's not that much big of a difference. Even like competing devices, well, I think some still advertise aerospace grade aluminum because Apple started doing that all the way back with the iPhone 6e. 6e. Jesus, my brain. With the iPhone 6s. So after the Bandgate, Apple switched to like 7000 series aluminum. I believe it's the exact name of the alloy. And yes, that is an aerospace grade aluminum. But aerospace grade aluminum is not built necessarily for like the lowest scratch resistance or anything. It's designed to be durable but lightweight, because obviously you want it to fly and not kill efficiency and everything, and you want it to like sustain a bit of damage, but it's not like built to withstand bombs or anything, which I think whenever you talk aerospace grades, people think more Top Gun, right, than just like a regular airliner, but that's what it's meant here. Ceramic Shield 2, 3 times better scratch resistance. Again, this one is always hard to exactly measure, but if you actually look at Jerry Rick Everything's video for the iPhone 17 and 17 Pro, you will find that they're actually the most scratch resistance phones that aren't like military grade constructions or something like that. I believe the Galaxy S24 actually came close to that. I believe that's starting to scratch at level 7 rather than at level 6, and then getting deeper grooves only at level 8. So it's a level ahead, I guess, of the regular Ceramic Shield and on other smartphones. And that's interesting because the Galaxy S24 did that jump, and then the Galaxy S25 immediately backtracked on that. And now we get something similar with the Galaxy S24 and S25 Ultra's anti-reflective screens, which has now taken a downgrade on the Galaxy S26 Ultra. It's still probably a little bit less reflective than this kind of screen from Apple, because it is a different technology in that regard. It does also compromise a tiny bit on color vibrancy, while this one does not at all. Not that it will help this old panel, but yeah, it's funny how tech sometimes actually gets worse over time. Obviously, if you have been a while in the Apple community, and just because I brought up the iPhone 6s with the aerospace grade aluminum, that one introduced 3D touch, right? And obviously we lost 3D touch over time, unfortunately. So Apple giveth and Apple taketh away, I guess. The Super Retina XDR display with OLED technology delivers a fantastic viewing experience. 1200 nits peak brightness suggests to me that it's still the same screen that's still rated for 800 nits. And that's not great, because it's hard to find Android devices that don't give you 1000 nits in the same scenario. It's really not something that I can really condone that much. A19, obviously 3 nanometer technology, 6-core CPU, so that's still the same, 2 P cores and 4 E cores. That's the same setup as on the A19 and the A19 Pro actually, but obviously the A19 has less cache than the A19 Pro, which does limit some of its performance, whether it's across multi-threaded task or whether it's for GPU tasks. Now for the GPU, it actually takes another bin step down. Now the iPhone Air actually features a 5-core GPU, but still an A19 Pro chip, so a chip with more cache. The iPhone 17 features a 5-core GPU, so that's the fully enabled A19, but less cache than the A19 Pro. This one is now to the iPhone 17 what the iPhone Air is to the iPhone Pro. Same amount of memory, maybe slightly slower memory. We'll have to look at the exact specs. Mainly a bint GPU, which is still cool, right? Because that also, of course, brings us to a GPU, probably with, oh yeah, it's not probably now, I just read it. The upgraded 16-core neural engines is optimized for large generative models, which will be limited by 8 gigs of memory, and combined with neural accelerators built into each GPU. So that's going to especially accelerate your time to first token. That's the biggest upgrade on the M5 and A19 generation of GPUs. Is it recommended to get an iPhone 14 Pro in 2026? Well, it really depends on what price you get. The Very Honest Jam, great name by the way. Because obviously if you get it for like $400, yeah, sure. I mean, you still get a way better camera system than anything that you get here. You might not get Apple Intelligence, but maybe you're just not into it, right? And again, $400, I do assume with that it's heavily like discounted, maybe even used. Overall, I do recommend people start more with the 15 Pro because of Apple Intelligence and 8 gigs of RAM. I think that's just going to give you a nice future proofing. But yeah, I don't think that there's anything wrong with the 14 Pro. I mean, even when I talk about like more memory, right? On the iPad, there's a full multitasking, multi-windowing system, right? And I use all of it, and I'm totally fine with an 8 gig M1 iPad Pro, right? So 8 gigabytes and even 6 gigabytes on a smartphone will still give you everything you need. So the 14 Pro obviously would be limited to 6 gigs of RAM. It's an A16 chip, which is still really good. It has really good battery life, especially if you don't use the always-on display, because its screen goes down to 1 hertz. It was Apple's 2nd generation LTPO. It still gets really bright, even in comparison to a lot of like cheaper Android devices. It has a 48 megapixel main camera. Now, one part why I do recommend the 15 Pro is that the HDR handling, because of the A17 Pro chip, is way better than the A16 chip, but you still get good cameras, right? Like it's not like iPhone cameras have been bad in years and years. Even this is not a bad camera, and the 14 Pro will arguably be better. So C1X modem. They bring up the 30% less energy than the modem in this iPhone 16 Pro, of course, but I actually would love to see an efficiency comparison versus the 16E, because 2 times faster, it would need to be quite a lot more efficient to compensate for that. But they still mention all-day battery life. Oh, so iPhone 17e can charge up to 50% in around 30 minutes. With fast, okay, so it's not, it's probably like 27 watt charging, not like 36 watts that we get on newer devices. KSP wonders also, this is the only iPhone in the 17 series without an island in the front and back. That depends if you count the plateau as an island, because the plateau is a plateau. But yeah, you're totally right. But also, yes, I guess you can kind of recreate an island with a case. But you do benefit now from the MagSafe ecosystem. I assume this is now a clear case that Apple makes, which now looks better than the clear case that they make for the iPhone 17 Pro, which is still so hilarious. I hate the clear case design that they came up with for the 17 Pro. But yeah, it will work also with those MagSafe wallets. Now, it could have worked for the iPhone 16. That's my question. If you put this case on the iPhone 16e, how strong are these magnets? Are these magnets actually strong by themselves to connect to accessories? Also, will the case fully fit? That's interesting. I probably should like research, but yeah, you see, like when we look at the cameras, like Apple brings up some stuff like object recognition. Nothing of that is crazy new. 48 megapixels, that was already on the 16e. 24 megapixels default camera. So there's nothing new here. I mean, we can now look actually in maybe after upgrading the website. Okay, the iPhone 17e is on the website. Okay, now here I can actually see the soft ping really well. I guess we can look at the 17 and the 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max, because these are all like somewhat similar in size, as you can see. The Pro is actually still a little bit larger here, and because of the 6.3 inches and the slightly, well, no, the thicker bezels here, right? These devices, the 17, 17E, are very small and similar in size. All-Star Gaming, I was asking about the main sensor size before, because in the 17E trailer it said the new 48 megapixel. This is the worst thing, in my opinion, that Apple does. I do not think that, like, whenever they say new, I think they often still make it a comparison to like older iPhone E's and stuff like that. Like, because look at this here, right? Okay, Super Retina XDR, 1200 nits, right? Look at the camera section here, right? It takes the 48 megapixel fusion camera, enables an optical quality 2x. When you actually look here, right, they do not actually call it a new fusion camera. Maybe they're more careful to not create some kind of lawsuit issues for themselves. But yeah, I do not think this is different. It also wasn't really rumored. Yeah, this is... I'll be totally honest, guys. I sometimes think that a lot of outrage... I assume a lot of you probably agree if you watch my channel, right? I think a lot of outrage about like Apple ads and Apple prices is often overstated. Most notably, first of all, because nobody forces you to either watch it or to buy it. Obviously, then we have worse cases. Now, not worst, but worse cases, which stuff like the ads for Apple Intelligence, right? Right, with Bella Ramsey talking with Siri doing things that are clearly not yet available in software, and then this stuff has to be delayed and all that jazz, right? All those compromises that come from having, all that misleading stuff that's out there now because of this. And then I actually have to say, to me, because of that ad, because it still was clear if you do even the smallest bit of research, like Apple Intelligence was not going to be at that stage when the ad came out. A lot of people expected it to be out like still way sooner than it is actually coming out, but you could kind of ignore that ad. And thankfully Apple, once they actually officially delayed Apple Intelligence, they did backtrack on it, right? They deleted that ad, they clarified a lot of stuff. I honestly, for me, I find this kind of stuff more misleading, right? Just putting the occasional new into something, right? Or much improved, right? And sure, if you make the comparison versus like an iPhone SE or even like a 3-year-old, like I think they make quite a few comparisons to like an iPhone 12 here or something like that. Yes, that's new and better, even if the sensor size might not actually be that much better, but it still goes, like, it still irks me the wrong way. I might just go with the 14 Pro, then wait for a few months to go to the 15 Pro. Since it's $400 on Amazon, the 14 Pro is 400, but it's 420 for the 15 Pro. Oh, but it's 420. The 15 Pro is 460. So I'm just gonna wait for a few months. That's probably always the smartest choice. Now, with the current market, with again, we've brought it up now 20 times, RAM and storage price explosions. Wouldn't assume that the discounted slash used market keeps dropping in price at the same pace as it usually does. But then again, the iPhone 17 is Apple's best-selling iPhone year ever in a way. Well, in terms of like adjusted, of course, for the time it came out. It still hasn't yet been a year. Right. So there are probably going to be a lot of iPhone 14 Pros, iPhone 15 Pros that are going to end up on the used market. And the used market, maybe you don't want to buy used, right? But the used market pushes the price down for the discounted market, right? Maybe some kind of reseller just really wants to sell the last of their inventory so they can fully transition to new, or maybe even reduce the size of their inventory because maybe rent has gone up in price or something like that. Case B, check for the seller rating and reviews before purchasing. That's very good advice. Thank you guys for helping each other out. This is why I do recommend you guys go to our Discord, because the Discord definitely is a great place for you to interact with similarly minded people. Let me actually jump to the latest. Yeah, you guys can see, obviously I post my videos there before they go live. People post news stories. We talk just in general among us. Jesus, I'm too old for these kinds of memes. Guys, I'm 29. I will be honest, I do not play Minecraft. I do not play Among Us. I do not get a lot of memes unless those memes actually become older and then they get explained to me. But hopefully you still like me. Yeah, so I don't think the camera is actually new, and let's actually compare those devices, right? So 6.3-inch displays with up to 3000 nits brightness, all that fun stuff. 6.1-inch. The fact that all these screens are called Super Retina XDR is really, really not great. Wait, if I click more, does that lead to the website of the 17E? Oh, yeah, it does. So explore. Oh, tech specs. Okay, that's actually nice. 256 gig. Okay, so logistically, I think that makes a lot of sense. I also think, by the way, that Apple should bring prices down. I can actually check. Maybe they've done that and haven't just noted. Okay, no, you paid $200 more for 512 gigs. That's too much for this device. Honestly, if you get the E model, just get it with 256. Forget there are higher versions out there. Like this should be $100 cheaper. Like if Apple is asked, well, why do you for some devices ask for $200 to go from 256 to 512 and some only $100? Apple can easily make up an excuse like, well, the storage in iPhone Pro is much faster, whatever, right? Pretty bullshit excuse because it doesn't double the price, obviously. But yeah, this is even with the current craziness of storage pricing, $200 for 256 gigs of more storage is just too much. That's also, by the way, one nice thing that you will get versus a lot of Android devices in that price range. It actually has pretty nice PPI. A lot of devices have like a standard 1080p screen, even when they go all the way up to 6.3 inches and stuff like that. So you get like about 40 to sometimes 60 PPI more. Yep, you get still the terrible, in my opinion, 800 nits max brightness. They should have even maybe optimized the cooling and give it 1000, because obviously that now compares versus like 3000 on those other devices. You get the binned A19 with the 4-core GPU. Like when I look at these specs, it's 26 millimeter, it's f1.6 aperture. It just makes sense to me that this is still the same 1/2.5 inch sensor. I believe, to be exact, it's 1/2.56 inches. Yeah, you get the 12 megapixel true depth camera, so it's unfortunately not the 18 megapixel center stage camera. So you get a lot actually while still upgrading to the 17. Especially like between the 16E and 16, at least you didn't have ProMotion added. Now that you get ProMotion on top of these other changes, I would argue that's a bigger difference than no MagSafe versus having MagSafe. Okay, so the battery, this is actually interesting. This is something that what does Apple rate it as? They rate the iPhone 17 for 30 hours of video playback and the 17E for 26 hours of video playback. So my assumption here is that this comes primarily from the iPhone 17's LTPO, much more efficient panel. If this actually still has around 4,000 milliamp hours, maybe it's slightly smaller because MagSafe takes up some space. Like, you get the efficiency of the C1X probably a little bit, and the A19 is still more efficient than the A18 on the 16E, but I mean, we can check it. Wait, okay, here's the 16E. Yeah, it was rated for the same amount of time. To be honest, that's a little bit disappointing because in some ways, it's just, in real world, it usually underperforms this kind of promise. That's all I'm gonna say. New guys in the chat. Sorry, I kind of scrolled up in the chat. Mark Tech, which case are you currently rocking on your 17 PM? It's either I actually cannot show you. Wait, I can show you one of them. Oh, here it is. So I have the clear case from ESR. I bought that really just because it's $17 and because it has this little stand, right? It's hard to do that when the case is not on the device, right? But you can basically use it as a little kickstand here to prop up your device. And I like that, unlike Apple's clear case, it actually has this new MagSafe ring that's still a ring rather than just covering the back in white. And I do have a tech woven case in dark blue, but because I use my iPhone 17 Pro Max as my continuity camera for my streams, I cannot show you that, obviously. For someone who wants to get an iPhone 17e, just get the 16e. No, I actually think there are enough changes. It does depend on the price difference. Now, if it's $100, I probably, don't even forget, a lot of the cheaper iPhone 16es out there, they will be 128 gigabytes. And I think 256 is quite a nice quality of life upgrade. I also think MagSafe is a nice quality of life upgrade. I also think that the 16e still struggled with its first generation C1 modem. So for a lot of times in your life, just walking throughout the city and everything, maybe taking public transport that's faster, that puts a bit more strain on your modem and your antenna, C1X is going to be a notable change. LOT Lot though the gamer, gosh, I really don't like the 17E. I feel it's so underpowered. Well, it's actually not underpowered. The A19 chip is extremely powerful, but it is like if you care a lot about the screen and maybe a really nice large camera sensor, there are better alternatives in its price range. I would even push you out of the Apple ecosystem, not in a bad way, like get out of here, this is Sparta, but just saying, yeah, there are better value, and you should vote with your wallet and show Apple that maybe 600 is a bit too much for you here. My opinion, just get the 15 Pro, not the 17E. I would agree with that. I think the 15 Pro is a better device than the 17E. But that makes sense. The 15 Pro was $1,000, right? Now, again, storage aligned, it would be $1,099. So yeah, of course, a device that's closer to half the price, even a few years later, will be worse in some ways. GFS 4195 15 Pro is older. older does not always mean worse. Don't forget, the A17 Pro chip, for example, while yes, it is going to be less powerful than the A19 Pro, it gives you 8 gigs of RAM, it gives you its full GPU core count, while this is a bint non-Pro chip, right? And of course, on top of it all, it's already 3 nanometer. Now, this is N3P. Of course, it's going to be more efficient. It's going to clock higher and everything, but it's still going to be a noticeable difference, right? It's not going to be as much of a noticeable difference, like if we were comparing to like a 5 or 6 nanometer based processor. Okay, some of the stuff is just you guys talking. Hey, homie, how you been? It's been a minute. I remember you live streamed the last Google event. Oh, that has been a while chilling with chat. Yeah, I'm good. I'm actually a lot better than I used to be. I lost a lot of weight. I've heavily improved on my personal life next to my work schedule and everything else. So yeah, I'm doing quite well. Thank you so much. S2's iOS, when 16e was released, it was rated at 26. And after 17 release, it got dropped to 26. Maybe it was dropped to 26 to coincide with iOS 26, right? Because while I do not agree with the theories that the 26 consumes way more battery life, it does consume a little bit more battery life. So this could be, I guess you could argue maybe Apple is doing it artificially to make it look worse or whatever, or it could just be that it's a more realistic testing environment for iOS 26. My girlfriend updated her iPhone 11 64 gigabyte to iPhone 17 Pro 512 gigabytes. She's happy AF. Well, that's an amazing upgrade. Of course, if you can wait that time. And I mean, the iPhone 11, like even for its time, before that, the iPhone 10, 10s had already existed, right? So you got an LCD 6.1-inch screen with huge bezels, relatively low pixel density, obviously 60 hertz. Way dimmer than any modern OLED screen. I think it's dimmer than actually the OLED screen here on the 17E. Yeah, that's a massive upgrade. Should I buy the 17E or buy an iPhone 15? If we are talking base models, I think the 17E will actually have some nice upgrades over a 15, but it's gonna depend on the final pricing. Obviously, I cannot speak to you about even I always put a lot of the pricing also in a context of carrier stuff, not just carrier deals, but think about it. You're probably paying like 30, 40, 50 bucks, depending on how much internet you want, what max speeds you want for your carrier contract. If you lay that out over the year, and then you compare those iPhones, right? Now, yes, I understand that maybe the price difference between these iPhones are $100 or $200, right? But you're really only using this phone with the cellular contract. So when you look at it as a percentage of your investment between the phone and the carrier stuff, $200 start to look really small relatively. So if you can get a really much better device out of it and you can stretch your budget, again, I do not recommend you go into depth or anything. No tech in the world is sacrificing, if you're watching from America, please don't sacrifice your health insurance or anything, or get a worse apartment because you want a better phone, right? But it's still, right, it's not that big of a difference. I wish Apple made their cases with, with a kickstand, 360 metal clips too. Yeah. Well, I actually would say I like that their cases for the 17 Pro don't protect the camera bump. They still protect it. I mean, I can look it up. No way do they not do it at all, right? iPhone. Guys, by the way, if you really want to force me to read your message, make it a super chat, because otherwise it's really hard for me to keep up with what have I read or not. Again, I'm not extorting you for $2 or $5. Only do it if you really can, if you're really interested. But it's actually quite a lively chat. Thank you, guys. That makes it a lot more fun to me. So if I look at accessories, no, they do protect the camera bump. Think about it. Even that tech woven case, they do have a lid here. I actually like that they do not protect that entire plateau. Like that's one, I think that's actually a downside of this case, because if you think about it, you want heat to go through that plateau, to go through that aluminum, because right here is your vapor chamber, right? And obviously you have an aluminum unibody that kind of collects heat from everywhere. Obviously, you have the main processor, you have the battery, right? All that stuff. You have obviously the input from the charging. You have the antennas that fire across the device, maybe even your millimeter wave antenna if you're in the US on the very top. Chilling with Tech, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. Again, to anybody who was watching and enjoying, please do the same. Also, hit the like button. Also, do whatever else you want. At this point, I do not want to unnerve you guys with too much shadows for the YouTube stuff. But man, my voice is going fast here. I guess that's from the dry air on the train. No, I'm happy with these cases. I'm not happy with the clear case for the 17 Pro, but that's a very different discussion. That has more to do with like the fact that it's not the standard ring, but rather that stupid like all white backside. What is my daily driver? My daily drivers are my iPhone 17 Pro Max, my M1 iPad Pro, my M1 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro with 1 terabytes of storage and 32 gigs of RAM. I have an Apple TV 4K, the latest one for now with the A15 chip. I have AirPods Pro 3 and Apple Watch Ultra 2. This is my lineup. If I forgot anything, let me know. For gaming, I have my PS5 Pro, but obviously that's not part of the Apple ecosystem. So I assume that wasn't a really big part of your question. I mean, could there be some camera changes here? I will get an OLED MacBook Pro probably eventually, but I might wait until like the M7 generation. For one, my M1 iPad Pro and M1 Max MacBook Pro, they both have mini LED. They both have ProMotion, so I'm not that limited. But I'm interested because they do say 2-in-1 camera system versus 48 megapixel Fusion camera system, but they have Fusion main on both of these. So my assumption is, and again, I could be proven wrong, and I would love to be proven wrong if this is actually a larger sensor and everything, right? My suggestion is that this is the same camera in terms of specs, but it is improved by the A19 chips image signal processor, right? Let me actually make that like this, because you can see some software-based differences here, right? Like next-gen portraits with focus and depth control, but you can also see that it brings up photographic styles, not latest generation photographic styles, which if it used the same camera as the iPhone 17 on the main, then it would be getting latest generation photographic styles. So obviously without an ultra-wide camera, it's not going to get macro photography and stuff like that, but yeah, USB 2 and stuff like that. Let's get back to the 16E as a comparison. I can actually, I think this makes most sense, right? So we have a Qi wireless charging with up to 7.5 watts, moving to MagSafe with 15 watts charging. Obviously, that gives it compatibility with MagSafe cases. Yeah, okay, so you get double the storage. You get the same screen, yeah, same brightness. You see like 1000 nits max brightness typical. That's just something like, and this is like 3000 nits peak outdoor, right? This is, sure, it's typical, but it also does not have any kind of boost for outdoor, right? If it did, then its HDR would be also brighter than this. I hope they bring up the next generation to 1000 nits, because if you compare it to the iPhone 16, the regular one, right, that's a screen that I think they could use. And you can also see that this screen is just very efficient, and it's optimized for for better. It's better optimized, like with 1 nit minimum brightness, so it's actually better in bright light and in darkness. And it would still be worse than the iPhone 18 and 18 Pro, which of course would give you 3,000 nits peak brightness. Maybe at that point they also can improve their typical brightness up to 1,200 nits or something like that. So yeah. When like in terms of exact size, it's 7.8 millimeters thick. It's 71.5 millimeters wide. It's exactly the same height. It was 146.7, and it's 2 grams heavier. Which I assume that's just the MagSafe magnets then. KSB wonders, what games have I been playing recently? I've been playing a lot of just smartphone games just to relax myself. I want to play Resident Evil Requiem, which I talked about in the beginning of the stream quite a little bit. Quite a little bit. I talked about it for a minute, but it's an Apple-focused stream, and Resident Evil Requiem is not on an Apple device yet. So, yeah, I talked about it and how it got like a probably the best PS5 Pro optimized version ever. So I'm looking forward to playing that when I find a little bit more time. Chilling with Tick saying, I want a new Apple TV and a proper AirPods Max. Well, we all want a new AirPods Max sequel. Just out of principle, we just want one with H3 chips at that point. It was already strange that Apple upgraded AirPods Pro 2 to AirPods Pro 3, but while keeping the H2 chip. My speculation is that they will bring up the AirPods Pro 3.5 or whatever they're going to call them, the ones that are getting the infrared camera for like air gestures and stuff like that. I would assume that one is going to get the H3 chip, and that one is going to help with transparency mode and active noise cancellation, while probably the main woofers and drivers, whatever, are going to be the same. And then AirPods Pro 4 might actually keep the H3 chips, and they are probably coming out in like 4 years. But they will actually have, once again, an improved audio system. That's kind of my speculation. Obviously, I do not know for sure. IP68, that's across the board. The Very Honest Gem, okay, you guys are talking amongst each other. That's great. A19 chip. 4-core GPU, now with neural accelerators. You see the difference here. I mean, that's going to be 25% faster than on iPhone 17e if there is no thermal throttling or anything. But actually consider, like, this device has a bigger battery. So if it weren't for the less efficient screen, it would actually be really like getting a lot out of its 4-core GPU, because it also has a slightly smaller screen with a little bit less resolution to drive. So that's funny. When do you think we'll see wireless lossless audio in AirPods Pro? I do not know, because I do not know if Apple cares if true lossless wireless audio because it does consume more energy. It does need a lot of data, so it might result in issues if you're further away from your phone and stuff like that. I think that the current codec is actually good enough, at the very least for AirPods Pro, probably in like perpetuity, because there's only so much quality that you can put into into something this small. And for AirPods Max, I think that they might improve the audio codec over time. I mean, everything gets improved over time. Obviously, just Bluetooth 6 itself could offer something new. It's just that Apple has Bluetooth 6 on like their phones and tablets now, but somehow not on their AirPods or anything like that yet. So maybe we'll see some of that, but I don't see that being a huge priority for Apple. I just want AirPods Max to be lighter. Well, that I don't think. I mean, this is the problem. Like, Apple is still Apple, right? And we saw that with Apple Vision Pro, where the second generation Apple Vision Pro, first of all, it has an absolutely unmatched processor in its category of devices, right? Nothing gets close to the M5 when it comes to virtual reality glasses or something like that. But did Apple suddenly make them out of plastic to make them lighter? No, they actually designed a headband in the back that's heavier so as to balance out the front weight of the actual headset, right? So yeah, like they still like their aluminum, they still like their unibody construction, they still like their glass, they still like their occasional gimmick like eyesight on Apple Vision Pro. So I do not know. I would like them to make AirPods Max out of plastic potentially. But then also that would come with problems of marketability. If it's an Apple product that gets such a huge material downgrade, now on the iPhone 17 Pro, they can do that. They can say, look, titanium is and was a great material, but aluminum is so much better for cooling. And on top of just using aluminum, we're actually making it now a unibody construction, right? So that's way better. And with the aluminum, we're also building in a vapor chamber, right? So cooling is way better. I do not know what a similar argument would be for AirPods Max to go from aluminum all the way down to plastic, right? Would we get like an iPhone 5C style reveal with like super vibrant colors, and it's like now they're unapologetically plastic, if you guys remember that? I'm not sure. By the way, I think the iPhone 17 basically is kind of the same thing as an iPhone 8 or 7. Yes, because of the base price, right? I mean, those prices will still increase, but yes, it is an inferior model. I would argue it's similar to the iPhone 8 specifically, because the iPhone 8 obviously existed next to the iPhone 10. And I would even argue next to the iPhone 8 Plus, because when you think about it, the iPhone 8 Plus had dual cameras versus the iPhone 8's single camera. It had more memory, 3 gigs of RAM rather than 2, so there was some difference in there. It had a way bigger battery, like functionally different, not just bigger to drive the bigger display, but actually bigger. So yeah, and that iPhone 8 Plus was then right in between the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 10. And that's kind of what you have with the iPhone 17e. And then you could imagine the iPhone 17 as kind of your version of the iPhone 8 Plus, at least pricing wise, obviously not the same in size and whatever. And then 17 Pro, 17 Pro Max, that's your iPhone 10, iPhone 10s Max afterwards. Yeah, makes sense. I heard vapor cooling from the 17 Pro will come to the next iPad Pro. Yes. Well, I'm not confirming it here, but it is the going rumor that the M6 processor is going to be paired with vapor chamber cooling, which of course is going to go really well with iPads, because iPads have always had an aluminum unibody construction. And on top of it all, there is some rumor, but that one is far more hazy, is that part of making the MacBook Pro thinner will come from a cooling system that's still active, so there will still be fans, but they will be vapor chamber based rather than just heat pipe based. So that should also help give you at least the same cooling capacity in a smaller form factor. Potentially, if you look at some of the cooling capacity, the devices like the Razer Blade offer and stuff like that, you could actually offer like probably 20% more cooling capacity with a vapor chamber system in like 20% less volume than versus a heat pipe system. Apple is good in a lot of things, but they're definitely not the number one provider of the best cooling in devices. I think so much should be clear. Wish iPad Air had OLED. Yeah, I mean, the iPad mini is the device rumored to get OLED this year, together with a redesign and water resistance and with a piezoelectric speaker system. So you wouldn't actually have speaker holes, speaker grills in the traditional sense, but your device would vibrate, right, to make a sound, which, because I'm from the medical field, this is how piezoelectricity is how ultrasonic sound stuff works. It's quite fun. I obviously will have to see about the final results, but yeah, it's cool. And after that, maybe that is what's in store for the M5 iPad Air, right? Maybe it gets an OLED screen. I mean, the M5 versus the M4 is not the biggest chip upgrade, especially since we're going to have 2nm based M6 by that time on the iPad Pro, the MacBooks and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. I know, like, Drew from Tylosive Tech recently made a video saying Apple gave up on the iPad, so now I have to, pretending as if he hadn't done that years ago, whatever. But yeah, just saying that I don't think that Apple has given up on the iPad, and I think that there's a lot that still come out here. If Apple did bring OLED to the iPad Air, I don't think it would tandem OLED. Yeah, it would be a single layer OLED. Now, there are some discussions about the upcoming iPad mini, whether or not it would actually get just a regular or a cheaper LTPS OLED or LTPO OLED, right? LTPO OLED is the OLED that enables variable refresh rate, much more efficient high refresh rate, much more efficient high brightness levels and things like that. That tandem OLED screen is 2 LTPO layers on top of each other. So it's best of the best, basically, on the iPhone, because it's not as actually widespread of a technology and it's not as much needed for smaller displays. You get single layer, you get LTPO on the 17 Pro and 17, and then you get LTPS. Now, there's obviously a better LTPS screen like on the iPhone 16, but then you can get a really bad one like on the 17e. So yeah, the one that's rumored for the iPad mini currently is an LTPS screen that would be probably 60 hertz fixed refresh rate. There have been some rumors about Apple implementing 90 hertz on like a studio display, which I'm not sure if that's something they would consider for like an iPad mini or an iPad Air, or maybe even like an iPhone 18e, right? Going still with LTPS OLED because it's cheaper than LTPO. It's also not as production limited, because for a while LTPO was actually limited only for the highest end devices, and in the last few years it started coming to the higher mid-range section and stuff like that. They could maybe implement like 90 hertz solution, but then with a fixed refresh rate. So yeah, we'll see. What do you prefer for tablets, 11 or 13 inches? I have a 13-inch, so I guess that's the one I prefer. And I do have a 12.9-inch iPad Pro on top of my own 13 inches. Get it? Dick jokes. Love them. The jokes, not the dicks. Jesus Christ, I'm so stupid. What OLED is iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max? That's single layer LTPO. It's not tandem OLED, but it is good enough for what it is. Think tandem OLED could come to the iPhones? Yes. There's actually been rumor that by 2028 we could be looking at tandem OLED iPhones. Actually, maybe I can bring that up. Tandem OLED iPhone. It's funny that we've kind of stopped talking about the iPhone 16e. I mean, this is a German article, but all I need is like the release year here. So there is a competition between Samsung and LG for tandem OLED iPhones. And yeah, it's rumored for 2028. So it is simply better. Stacked screen layers are simply better than one. It makes them more efficient. It makes them longer lasting. With those things, it can also just offset that with much higher brightness if you want to, which is great. That'd be dope. Not gonna lie, tandem OLED on iPhones Pro. Yeah, like, well, we are already getting rumors of like, and I don't know exactly what's that supposed to mean, but this year's iPhones are supposedly getting LTPO plus, uh, which I do not know, like, because we are technically already on like the third or fourth generation LTPO panels, right? So getting LTPO plus, and that's for iPhones and the tech used in the upcoming tandem OLED MacBook Pros and stuff like that. So supposedly, obviously, the main thing for the Plus is higher efficiency, with it potentially higher brightness. But it's interesting that it might be labeled as separate, because if you look at, for example, at the tech specs, Apple Watch Ultra. Where's the comparison button? Why is our Apple's comparison buttons are always so small? Here, for example, on the Apple Watch, they do even label the generation of LTPO panel that they use, right? And that impacts the max brightness. Now, that obviously partially also has to do with the cooling capability of the device, the battery of the device. But yeah, like you have an Apple Watch Ultra 3 and Apple Watch Series 11 LTPO 3, and that, for example, allows for always on. With much smoother refresh rates and stuff like that. So that's quite cool. And yeah, we are definitely overdue for like a 3-nanometer chip upgrade, because this one is getting a little bit old in the tooth, to be quite honest. This is basically just a rebrand of already existing technologies. Guys, to everyone who is watching, we have more viewers than we have likes, which obviously it's your right not to like the video, but if you're enjoying this, please do so. That helps tremendously. And of course, subscribe to the channel to see future videos. I will be back tomorrow. Now, I'm not quitting, don't leave. I will be back tomorrow to, of course, react to whatever Apple releases tomorrow. And of course, on top of it all, hit the notification bell, so for the future, you know when I'm going live next. You see, I love interacting with a lively live chat, getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements, your questions. However, if you really want to insist on me reading your live chat, make it a super chat. Just a small donation helps a lot. You can also become a permanent supporter of this channel by becoming a channel member right here on YouTube, or a supporter over on Patreon. So all kinds of engagement help. I also left the Discord link for our community right at the very top of the live chat, but you can also find it in the description of this channel if you're watching this video as a VOD afterwards. I only say that because it's now been 2 hours into the stream and I wanted to point this all out. Chilling with tech, there's one thing that I disagree with you. I wish they brought back Touch ID on the camera button or power button. I understand it, but it's at some point, it's just going to add cost. And it's just going to add more components for Apple to maintain and upgrade, or year over year. Guys, I see your likes are coming in. That helps tremendously. So as long as they really keep improving Face ID, I do not need Touch ID to return. I do understand why for some people with masks or whatever, however you work, maybe Touch ID is better. For me, Touch ID has never been that great. I don't know. I sweat a lot, I guess, or I have large glands, to put it more politically correct. But yeah, like it just becomes too much at some point, and it's just going to add to the cost. Lotho the Gamer, if you can stream more often, we'd love that, and probably more subscription, join memberships. Yeah, I know. I know it would result in that. Oh, do you mean like options on the channel? Well, there's I see on the join button we have the €299 MarkTech Pro, and then the $499 MarkTech Pro Max. It's interesting. Yeah, I haven't created a cheaper option, but I kind of thought to make like a $149 or something like that. But yeah, thank you for that. But obviously, if you still want to support me before I made that change, would also be much appreciated. So 17E spec points. One thing that I really want to see when it comes to the cases. Does that mean that the 16E, because it's the exact same size, does that mean that, where's the accessories button? Why are these other buttons so much smaller? Just make this one larger, because this is way too small. iPhone accessories, iPhone Air. cases. I want to see if the cases for the iPhone 17e are compatible with the iPhone 16e. Compatibility. It says only 17e, but the device is the exact same size. Wait, did the 16e have an action button, or did the 16e have like a ring slider? It had the action button, right? USB-C, where did they mention? I think they mentioned it always closer to like the camera, the screen stuff. Yeah, action button here, iPhone 16e, action button. Wait, why is this case not compatible with the 16e? That's stupid. Because at the very least, I mean, you wouldn't be getting faster MagSafe charging through that, but you would be getting like at least full-on magnetic adhesion from that. Yeah. Chilling, check your favorite tech websites or tech podcasts. Well, in terms of YouTube, to be honest, I mostly watch this stuff just for my channel because it just gets too much in terms of consumption. Plus, in recent times, I've been following a lot of politics and history and stuff. Obviously, there's a fucking war in the Middle East right now, but that's a different discussion. KSB, thank you for confirming. Yeah, it's action button based. But yeah, okay, Astius iOS, I agree. Might be an Apple trick just to make people not buy the 17e case because it has MagSafe. Yeah, I kind of agree. And this would go back to like those smaller marketing gimmicks that Apple makes and that a lot of other companies do too. But obviously, I know more about Apple than I do a lot of these other companies. This is the kind of stuff I really don't like. Now, maybe I'm wrong and maybe there is actually some reason. I don't know. Maybe the magnets in the case are actually interfering with some kind of iPhone 16e functionality. Not that that should really be the case. I mean, the Galaxy S25 Ultra, for example, does not recommend you get third-party Galaxy S. Sorry, not 25 Ultra, but it should probably apply there. Third-party case magnets. That was an issue that people brought up recently. Galaxy S26 Ultra warns about Qi2 magnetic case interfering with the S Pen. So while there obviously are a lot of third-party cases for Samsung and stuff like that, I'm not sure if that applied to the Galaxy S25 Ultra, but and even their execs actually came out and said they're working on potentially a new S Pen that maybe wouldn't have those issues, which is crazy pants. Announcing the Galaxy S26 Ultra, and one day after that, doing an interview saying, "Oh yes, we are looking at silicon carbon batteries." And yes, we're looking at a redesigned S Pen. And I'm like, guys, why are you killing your own device here? Or maybe you could not charge the iPhone 16e with wireless charger. Wait, no, you could charge. The iPhone 16e always had wireless charging. It was limited to, Qi2. It was limited to 7.5 watts, but it didn't have magnets. Now, I do not know if any magnets would like interfere with like the coil ring. That coil ring is, I guess it's copper. Like, I don't know, like if any of that interferes. Do you think Apple would ever release an anniversary iPod model? No. Apple does not, like Apple did like one special iPhone 3GS for some artist that Steve liked or whatever. They do not do that stuff. If anything, if they would do anything resembling iPods, I think it would be probably like a software gimmick, right? Maybe it would be like returning cover flow to the Apple Music app or something like that. Or maybe they would allow you to customize the icon, right? To make it like an old iPod logo. That's still not something Apple really does. And I would still assume it would be like a liquid glass take on the iPod logo. But No, that's something that other brands do. Like I've seen, like there have been like those mini consoles, right? Like of like the Super NES and NES, and they come preloaded with a lot of games because they obviously don't support those old cartridges. They have to run that old stuff through emulators anyway. Apple does not do stuff like that. Sometimes it seems like it would be a cool idea, but I don't think that's really what Apple's specialty is about. Guys, we're about finished with the Apple stuff, and I wanted to ask you now. There is a lot of Xiaomi stuff right now, but I do need to take that a little bit more in. Maybe I'll talk about it tomorrow or something like that. But if you are interested, we have an annual. Basically a little bit of a tradition on this channel, which is we watch the Super SAF camera comparisons between the Galaxy S flagships and the iPhone Pro Max flagships, and we criticize sometimes this methodology. We see whether we actually agree with his takes or not. And while obviously I know most of you are coming here in for the Apple stuff, but we've talked about it now for 2 hours for 2 devices and then a lot with the chat. I see Riley was actually overtaken by Astuce iOS as the #1 yapper of today's stream. I see the viewership numbers are going down after this announcement, but I still would like to do it because I do not think I have anything more to say, honestly, about the iPhone 17e or something like that. But hey, if you still have any questions, feel free to ask them. You guys know I love chatting with you. Okay, it should be 1080p, which should be enough because I do stream in 1080p. Whenever there's like a detailed question, I'll usually defer to him unless the difference is really clear. Like, I mean, the iPhone is actually in focus. This one is totally screwing up the focus, but whatever. I think we can watch it at 1.1 speed. He speaks fast enough, but not quite. Yeah, I think that should be it. KSP Wonders, I was #1 for a few seconds. Wait, KSP Wonders, after the last chat, you are now the #1 yapper again. So congratulations to your back and forth, Riley, Astuce, and KSB. I do not know why Chilling with Tech is not getting anything. I guess you joined too late for point collection. Riley saying, I'm waiting for the cheaper Mac. Well, that's something you'll have to wait for probably until Wednesday. There is still a discussion, and I had that on my Discord, where some people might expect that tomorrow we get the cheaper MacBook and that we get the more exciting M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pro on Wednesday. But I could honestly see that being the other way around because while the M5 Pro and Max MacBook Pro, yes, they are very exciting to us as enthusiasts and things like that, they are way more expensive, like 3 times more the base price than whatever the cheaper MacBook is going to be. So I think Apple might actually make it the last announcement of this week. And there is still stuff that's missing. HomePod Mini, though I assume HomePod Mini is going to come alongside the Siri upgrade. And there is a new Apple TV, which I do not understand unless there are new features for tvOS that are in the works that we haven't discussed yet. I do not understand why we haven't yet gotten an A17 or an A18 based Apple TV. Yeah, Riley, now you're the #1 yapper again. I guess nobody beats the OG in that regard.
Hey, Saf, you're on Super Saf.
Okay, let me get to 0. As always, guys, let me know what the audio and video quality is for you. I tend to make my video reactions to slightly too silent or whatever. So let me know if you want it a little bit louder or something like that. Maybe I'm overcompensating here, actually. And obviously, whenever the stream does any kind of hiccups or shit like that, let me know too.
What's up, guys? Saf here on Super Saf TV, and welcome to the Super Saf.
Yeah, like the Galaxy just isn't in focus. It screws up his hair. Like the iPhone does a little bit, but that's just an outline drawn. The Galaxy just completely screws up his hair. Now, I do like his skin color more here, but this is also like everything is super vibrant here. Yeah, Riley's getting basically the points because Riley's a freaking asshole, but we love him for that. He joins the stream, keeps it in the background, collects the point from being basically one of the first to enter the stream, but then he only comments when something comes along that actually interests him, which means Riley is totally tuned out during any kind of AI talk and during basically most products that are not very interesting to him.
Style camera comparison between the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra and the iPhone 17 Pro Max.
Okay, so the iPhone was isolating the noise here a little bit better. I've actually seen some people say that the Galaxy has better audio, but I've seen that be like with this AI filter crap. I mean, Apple does that too, and seems like maybe Samsung has a better AI noise canceller if you do like the extreme version, but if you just go with like natural and default, the iPhone to me usually sounds better.
As always, we'll be looking at all the cameras.
Yeah, the iPhone sounds noticeably better. Like look at this. The iPhone is in focus. Not only is it in focus, but it actually has detail, right? I would probably wager that maybe he's a tiny bit too pale on the iPhone, but the background looks way more realistic. And then, yeah, you have that extra amount of detail. You have that way better like perspective for like, yeah, the iPhone screws up a little bit around his head right here, but the Galaxy just cuts off into his hair to compensate for that, which is worse. And then it just stops caring about the details on his jacket or anything like that.
We'll be looking at video, images, low light. There'll be some chapters down below.
Don't do AI girlfriends, Riley. We cannot lose you. I fear you're just going to spend time with her and not me. Chilling with Tech saying, gonna step out, but take care, little. Hope you and everyone has a good rest of the day. Thank you so much for being so engaged and for subscribing. I hope you join us tomorrow. Should be about the same time, maybe at worst half an hour later, depending a little bit on my work schedule.
Let's get to it.
Now, we're going to start by looking at some images from the primary cameras. As you can see, both...
Yeah, in good lighting, there really shouldn't be a difference. I would, like, is there more blown out here in the background? But even then, that's like so easy to adjust with like the slightest exposure change. Like the Galaxy is actually darker here for the path, which actually looked the other way around for the video, which is funny.
Take excellent photos with
yeah,
great detail and dynamic range. As always.
So the time of when the iPhone until the 15 Pro Max was notably behind in dynamic range, those times are over, thankfully. In fact, the iPhone, especially for the front camera, very often leads. It leads basically everyone except Google in terms of raw computational thing. Like definitely the Chinese guys, but the Chinese guys compensated for much larger sensors. Some of them are even using now the new low-fig technology, which Apple is supposedly using starting next year. So with the iPhone like 19 Pro and Pro Max.
Samsung tends to go for more punchy, more vibrant colors.
I would actually say, well, it depends. I would love like a neutral, like this was captured with a DSLR as a reference. I do like the colors on the green here a tiny bit better on Samsung. It feels like the iPhone like took a little bit too much green from the environment. And the sky looks a little bit better exposed on the Galaxy.
Whereas the iPhone...
But then it also depends where exactly your focus was, right? If, like, because it doesn't zoom in, if your focus point was actually on something really green, then the iPhone kind of acted more correctly and probably captured some more detail.
Tends to go for more of a neutral look. Now, we do have photographic styles on the iPhone, so you can dial in.
So this is something that I feel like does not get mentioned enough. People tend to go with default. Like, the problem with default, it's not that, yes, the default experience should be good, but I would argue photographic styles are basically part of default. They're so easy to use. They're so front and center in the way they're integrated. You just have to learn about them once, and that's basically it. You can play around with them a lot, so you don't even have to get it fully right because you can edit those afterwards, which is the biggest difference between iPhone and any form of competition in that regard. I guess you can capture RAW, which gives you more editing flexibility afterwards on those devices as well. But that's now really a non-default experience.
The look that you like. Personally, I do prefer a neutral look and then editing it after the fact if I like. Now, one advantage that the
Also, Gaming IT, was it low tick with China phones? Also, why do only Chinese phones use one type sensor? I thought it was low fig. I guess I can quickly look it up. Low fig sensor. Yeah, LOFIC. It is in its most basic form, it's all about extending dynamic range. The problem is that Xiaomi and others who have now started integrating this technology also provide like really unfair iPhone to Xiaomi comparisons and stuff like that, where the exposure settings are just vastly different. And that's why I said why I do want to talk about these phones too, but there is a lot of like, before we actually get like really in-depth breakdowns and reviews and camera comparisons, I do not want to make any statements and look foolish. And when it comes to 1-inch sensors, well, they are more expensive, and Chinese devices tend to accept much lower profit margins. There are some downsides with 1-inch sensors, like the optical system on top of them has to be noticeably thicker to provide the same edge-to-edge sharpness. Like there is some like minimal focal distance can suffer, as it can also suffer from very wide aperture, as we actually see with the Samsung. Samsung is actually much less capable of good macro mode on its telephoto or its main camera than it was before, which leads you to using the really bad ultra wide for this. The iPhone is also bad at minimal focal distance, but then the iPhone has other benefits, like the iPhone, for example, is pretty much the only device that I can think of that has sensor shift optical image stabilization. So where not the entire like camera system moves around to offset like shaking or whatever, but just the sensor. It makes it much more precise, much more minuscule. Now, we do have some gimbal gimmicks on some Chinese devices, like the latest, I'm not sure it was like Xiaomi or whatever, like the robot phone, right? They called it robot phone gimbal. That's a stupid gimmick. That has absolutely nothing to do with actual technical innovation. Oh, that's from Honor, right? That's the robot phone. And you can see how fat this thing has to be in the back. So its gimbal gimmick can kind of extend, but then you can also use your back camera as your front camera. Yeah, there is a lot happening, and I do not want to downplay it. Just because Apple doesn't do it, that doesn't mean it's bad. But there are some downsides that people don't talk about. KSB, my right AirPod stops randomly while playing something. I tried cleaning it, but no change. Do you think the firmware update screwed it up? Well, it depends. Is it a beta firmware or an official release? Because I've been on AirPods mostly on official releases, and I haven't had any such issues. Now, again, this could be a device-to-device difference based on still software. But yeah, maybe look into like restoring your AirPods. Right, obviously, I do not need to explain you their instructions on how to do it online. And if not, go to like an Apple store and show them.
iPhone has that in good light by default. It does shoot at 24 megapixels. The Samsung by default shoots at 12 megapixels. And that means by default, you do get high resolution images in.
So I'm not sure if this is a difference now in color processing, but you can see that it's a bit brighter, which would actually naturally come from the wider aperture. So these have very comparably sized sensors. The iPhone on the main uses a 1/1.28. This one uses a 1/1.3, maybe 1.33 to be exact. It's hard to actually find the exact spec. But the iPhone has an f1.8 aperture, while this one has an f1.4 aperture. So this should allow for like a 40% more light onto the sensor. Now, again, that's not quite how all the math works always, because there are some other downsides need to consider. There's only so much light a relatively small sensor can even capture. And the sensor needs to be optimized for relatively fast processing and whatever. Like the detail on the iPhone are stronger. But then again, here I see a little bit more detail, but I see just being more vibrant. So that's probably not really a difference from the wider aperture.
Good light from the iPhone. Now, yes, you can download the camera assist
3.0, Jesus, what did Samsung do wrong there?
app from the Galaxy Store on the S26 Ultra and set your images to be default 24 megapixels, but that requires quite a few extra steps, and it's not like what we've got out of the...
I also would like, the problem is this also doesn't bother me. If this was actually just better across the board, right, than the regular camera, then I would also ask, well, why isn't this a feature in the regular camera app? Maybe even as like a beta thing. But the other thing I would ask, like, are there downsides to the 24 megapixel capture? Does the camera zoom in a little bit more? Does it slow? Is it slower while capturing, right? These are all things that the iPhone has managed extremely well in its 24 megapixel default mode. Even its size in megabytes is not even that much larger than 12 megapixel, while still giving you a substantial amount of extra detail. So these are differences that I would like to see explored before I say the app is worthless or the default experience should be better.
Box on the iPhone. Having said that, we do have higher resolutions on both devices. So on the iPhone, you've got a max of 48 megapixels.
Okay, so you can see that the iPhone's image is actually, you can see that it's not actually lower detail, because the detail is still all there pretty much, but the iPhone is a softer image. So there is a lot of sharpening here, which in this case I actually like on the Galaxy. It does not feel too artificial. Now here on the brick building stuff, it does look artificial right here. But here it actually looks a little bit nicer and more detailed than the iPhone. I would say the same thing about this tree. So yeah, I would argue this has way better sharpening balance versus like the Galaxy S25 Ultra, which I often found like way too over sharpened.
Pixels, and if we compare this to 50 megapixels on the Samsung, you can see we've got lots more detail on both.
No, this is actually, no, this is objectively not detailed. This is sharpening, which again is not bad, but you can see even from like the outline of those windows, some of it just looks like the gap is twice as wide or something like that. So, but partially here we might get a tiny bit more detail because of the wider aperture in this case.
But I do find that the Samsung is sharper. Now, Samsung does apply some post-sharpening to their images, but it does work in this instance very well. And of course, the Samsung does have a very high resolution 200 megapixel sensor, which means you can get a ton of detail.
Yeah.
And moving on to low light images from the primary cameras, the first thing you'll notice from this image is that we don't have those lens flare balls on the S26.
Yeah, but I can see which phone handles the sky color way better.
Ultra's image, whereas those are there on the iPhone. Now, Samsung does have new lenses for their cameras to reduce lens flare, and it really is working in this image. Having said that, although low-light images were close in some instances, mostly I did find that I preferred low-light images from the primary camera.
One thing that is definitely also better versus... Now, it's also going to be an actual experiential differences between like the 10-bit screen and stuff like that. But also you have way less color banding on the S26 Ultra than you previously got on the S25 Ultra. So they're actually improving. Now, it's probably partially from just letting in more light, but it has a better grasp on sharpening, at least from that one image that I saw, and it has a better grasp on color banding, especially in low light scenarios, which is quite good. Now, I would want to know what the exposure time for these images was. Sometimes this is one thing where I always criticize SuperSaf for his lack of like telling us, but I prefer having the exact same exposure time, and then you can also add, but this device defaulted to 3 seconds, this device defaulted to 5 seconds. Here is how they both look at 3 seconds, here's how they both look at 5 seconds, right? I think that would be a very reasonable way to point it all out. That being said, I actually think that in terms of night feeling, the Galaxy nails this a little bit better. But then the amount of detail, which is why I actually think the iPhone either dealt with it way better because of its better optical image stabilization, or it was exposing for longer, which also benefits, by the way, from the optical image, from the better optical image stabilization, the sensor shift stabilization. Like, this is now not a question of sharpening. There's just way more detail down there, right? I would even argue there's probably more, like, no matter where you focus, there's more detail across the board in the iPhone's image. Does the iPhone have a true 10-bit screen or 8 plus FRC? As far as I know, it's true 10-bit. I think that Apple might have implemented FRC early on, and that's why they had 10-bit that much earlier than Samsung. Now, on MacBooks, right, that's where we have FRC, right? Just because LCD panels are relatively hard to get in like 10-bit variety. But on I believe, at least ever since the iPhone 15 Pro Max, I believe they are truly 10-bit. At the very least, they are functionally impossible to tell apart. And whatever you say about the bit handling, right, the color banding is better on the S26 Ultra than on the S25 Ultra, but still worse than the iPhone if you look at stuff like here.
The iPhone. You can see this image here. It's sharper on the iPhone compared to the S26.
It also has nicer colors. It has way better color reproduction. It has, in this scenario, the iPhone actually does have a little bit of color banding. That means it was probably captured in really, really low light. But in this case, yeah, it's just better across the, which is, by the way, bad for the Samsung, right? Because, like, consider the sensor size is almost identical, right? That difference between 1/1.28 versus 1/3.3, 1/1.33, sorry, like, combined with a so much larger aperture, this is a monumental difference. This is either just Apple software or a combination of the software with the better image stabilization. I wonder if you put the Galaxy on a tripod, what that would result in.
Ultra. And once again, on this image here, although...
Okay, the Galaxy just screwed it up. I mean, it kind of tried to focus on the fence. I'm not sure what his actual focal point was. It feels like the Galaxy just didn't fully focus on anything. The iPhone very clearly focused on the house, which I think the iPhone image would look noticeably different if you forced it to focus on the fence, of course.
The Samsung appears to be brighter. If you look at the detail on the bricks and on the slabs, you can see that the iPhone is a lot.
Yeah, and you can also see, like, just like, you know, if Samsung thought they had that detail, they would sharpen the fuck out of it, at least with the Galaxy S25 series. The fact that I think they just had so little detail that the algorithm thought, nope, over sharpening makes no sense here. While the iPhone is just super sharp and clearly not over sharpened. Like, when you look at, for example, the bezels surrounding each brick, they're super thin, so there's no over sharpening here.
Sharper. Now, it seems like in using a longer shutter speed on the Samsung, it is introducing some shake. And with that wider f1.4 aperture, I was expecting better performance in low light. However, I would have to say that the iPhone is better overall. You can see this more on this super low light in...
What the fuck? What? Wait, are there some software issues with the Galaxy S20? I remember even the S25 Ultra being a little bit better than this. This is just embarrassing. But it does kind of line up with the latest Max Tech video that had, like, the iPhone winning like 22 to 24 to like 12 to 14. I think they captured like around 40 images, not sure. I didn't watch the full video.
Those shots, the iPhone has a brighter image. It's also sharper with more detail. Now let's take a look at the ultra-wide camera. Hey, you again. Do you want to remind them about the hands-on comparison we're working on? You heard the man. We are working on a detailed comparison of the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra versus the iPhone 17 Pro Max, looking at everything else, not just the cameras. If you want to see that first, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon. So although both do decent in most situations, I did prefer the Samsung overall. It was consistent.
This looks a tad bit too vibrant. Again, something you can easily change with photographic styles on the iPhone. Maybe the color, the sky exposure here is a little bit better. They did not enable ocean mode. Yeah, that one was really like that was such a mindfuck during the event, because ocean mode actually felt kind of cool. Not saying it's actually a game changer, definitely not for me. Like I don't even take my phone to the freaking pool, not into the water at the very least. But yeah, it's funny. Like they waited like half the event to talk about the cameras, and then they waited half of the rest of the event to mention ocean mode during their environmental responsibility section.
Sharper with more detail and dynamic range, especially in this example. If you look towards the top of the image, the iPhone does have a lot of noise, whereas the Samsung has managed it better. And
yeah, I mean, it depends a little bit where exactly you were focusing on, but here I would actually definitely say I prefer the Galaxy's image.
this is further demonstrated in low light images from the ultra-wide camera.
Yeah. I don't know what Apple is doing. This is where, this is ironically what I kind of expected, not fully, because the optical image stabilization on iPhone is going to help on the main camera. But they use very similar ultra-wide sensors, but the Galaxy has an f1.9 aperture versus the iPhone's f2.2. So adding more light allows it probably to expose for a different time and things like that. And yeah, I've preferred the Galaxy's ultra-wide now for a few years versus the iPhones. This difference will not always be this huge, and it also comes up to my mind that I don't think either image is good enough for me to want to like post it, but the iPhone's image here is nigh unusable.
You can see
but
here,
then again, I would love to know the difference. What was the exposure time and things like that?
the Samsung is much sharper. Unfortunately, the iPhone's ultra-wide
Well, I actually wouldn't say that really that much. There is sharpening here. Like, look at how thick the borders basically around those window frames are, right? Like, this is over sharpening. There's a little bit of the pattern here on the sides, but then again, this pattern might have just been made up by the AI. That happens sometimes with Samsung.
camera is very soft in my experience, especially in low light. Here's another example. You can see the brick detail much better on the Samsung versus the iPhone.
Yeah, I would argue the amount of actual detail is very comparable here, but I do prefer still the Galaxy's image.
And finally, in this example here as well.
No, the color is just way with the, like, I know, like, the Galaxy tried to, like, what, boost up the exposure based on the grass is like the reference white point. Is that what happened here? But like this image, like, I don't know what was happening. Maybe you had like an alien invasion from Mars in the background, but just in colors, there's a huge difference.
On the Samsung versus the iPhone, which is very, very soft. Now, both devices can take macro shots, and they do a great job. You can focus.
I prefer actually the macro mode from like the telephotos on some Chinese devices nowadays. Ultra wide is just really hard to, like, you have to bring it up that close. It constantly loses focus.
In closer with the iPhone. The Samsung has some sharpening processing, which does tend to work in macro shots, and I think they both do really well. Now for the telephoto cameras. So we have a single telephoto camera on the iPhone.
This has two, one of them being totally useless.
Gives you around 4 times optical zoom. On the Samsung, you have 2 optical zoom cameras, one at 3 times and the other at 5 times. Now we can shoot at 2 times zoom on both devices, and this is the equivalent of lossless zoom because it's using the middle part of the sensors, and they both seem to be doing really well.
The temperature of the night shot was way off. Yeah, that is always a discussion when it comes to detail, right?
This is where the optical zoom camera of the S26 Ultra kicks in.
Wait, why is there a difference in how much they're zoomed in at 3x? I mean, yeah, this is sharper, but you just shoot at 4x and get a way better image on the iPhone.
And it gives you a sharper result. This is something that we can clearly see when we go to 200.
But you can see, like, the 3x is just garbage. Like, yes, it gives you sharpness because it captures more pixels per area at this point, But like everything else about the image, I still prefer here.
Now this is
Like even like the bokeh depth of field, which really shouldn't be the case because one is at least a real telephoto
going to
camera.
go all the way up to around 3.9 times, but when we hit 4 times optical zoom, this is where the optical zoom camera of the iPhone kicks in.
You also see just a way different color. And again, this is also a scenario where I would say just zoom in at 5x for the Galaxy. Just screw that freaking bad 3x. Use that money that you take out. Use that space for a larger battery and that money for a larger sensor for the 5x telephoto.
And it's going to give you a sharper result. Now this is going to carry on all the way up to around 4.9 times until we hit 5 times zoom when the 5 times optical zoom camera of the Samsung kicks in. And when we compare the
I would say they look almost the same.
4 times zoom camera of the iPhone versus the 5 times zoom camera of the Samsung, things are very, very close. And one thing you will notice is that although we have 4 times versus 5
yeah, they're actually not that far away from each other. The iPhone's 4X, I believe, is 100mm zoom or 100 megapixel range, whatever. And the Galaxy is 111
times. The iPhone is slightly closer, and that's because they're both using different focal lengths.
Yeah.
Now, what about extended zoom? If we go to around 10 times, you can see that Samsung is doing a better job, and it's giving...
Yeah, the problem is a lot of it is now sharpening. It also now requires me to actually capture like 8x or 10x images, which I will do sometimes to force like the device to focus on something that's further away, but it doesn't actually create that much extra detail.
You a cleaner result. Even if we go to the maximum...
Yeah, this is, by the way, not real, right? You see that? You see how the fact that this is folded does not actually compute here. The AI basically made it look almost like a drawn line. You can even see, like, this is AI text basically on top of it. Like, it's just so clearly not the like you can see that with the jacket in here, right? If this was actual detail, like look at that, like if it can capture like dirt that's up here, it should be able much better, which because the focal range for it should be about the same, to capture the detail in his jacket. You can also see like that outline of his shirt. It's just like a smooth half circle line that was drawn here, right? Or a super sharp line, which again, is not bad. It still looks better than the S25 Ultra did in such scenarios. But man, Apple should really add like 5% more sharpening to show the others how it's done. Because at this point, the iPhone is just a bit too soft because everything else has pushed so far into over-sharpening.
Zoom of the iPhone at 40 times and compared to the Samsung still doing better. Now, granted, it looks like the Samsung is using some AI to enhance the image. Not as much as what we've seen on other devices.
Okay, I see he's learning from the past. He also recognizes his own pattern. He failed to analyze some stuff like this as AI in the past.
But nevertheless, it's doing a better job. You can go all the way up to 100 times on the Samsung.
And you can now see that the text is basically entirely redrawn, because why would it not get softer? The only reason is because of AI. Only time we feel happy that Apple does not have AI. Well, Apple would have all the AI in the world for stuff like this. They do even apply quite aggressive sharpening here. It's just that it looks so tame in comparison to Samsung. Whenever MaxTag does like their photos from like their roof, right? There's like a sign in front of their building, right? And it's pretty far away. So even with like 8x zoom or 10x zoom, whatever, right? Smartphones tend to like overcorrect that sign with AI override, and so does the iPhone. But clearly, other devices do it way more aggressively.
This is something that I don't tend to use too much, but hey, the option is there. Now, although the extended zoom is better on the Samsung in good light, as soon as you go to low light,
which, mind you, this one, now, this is a 5x zoom, but this one actually is not ahead of the iPhone, which has an f2.8 aperture. Well, this has an f2.9 aperture, plus the iPhone's optical image stabilization on its zoom camera. is about as good as its optical image stabilization on its main camera. If you actually look at that zoom camera portion on the device, it's actually really huge in the Pro Max devices. And one might think, well, even with the tetra prism arrangement, it shouldn't be that big for an 1/2.5 inch sensor, right? But it is that big because its image stabilization is super advanced.
Things go in iPhone's favor. And this is despite the fact that we now have a wider aperture on the telephoto camera of the Samsung. And although I would say...
Wait, it's wider versus the previous generation, not versus the iPhone, right? It's f3.4 now to f2.9 on the Galaxy. I believe on the iPhone it has actually been f2.8 ever since they switched to a 5x and then later a 4x zoom. Do they even outline those details in the comparison? So do I need to go into the details? Damn, we need to go into the detailed tech specs here. Guys, we've been streaming now for almost 3 hours, which is definitely longer than I expected. Please, if you want to support this channel directly, or just first do all the YouTube jazz, subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, you know the drill by now. But also, if you want to support me directly, make sure that my streams are longer and more regular. Send a super chat, send a super sticker, consider becoming a channel member right here on YouTube. It's all very much appreciated. Explore, give me tech specs at the iPhones. Telephoto. Yeah, it's an f2.8 aperture, or f by 2.8 aperture. So, yep, this is... the Galaxy has a wider aperture than the the Galaxy S26 Ultra has a wider aperture than the S25 Ultra, but it's still not quite as wide as the iPhone. I think Riley's AFK let me steal some points. Well, do that with chats, super chats, whatever you want.
It's better compared to the S25 Ultra. It's still not as good as the results that we get on the iPhone. You can see at around 10 times as well as around 20 times, the iPhone is just giving an overall...
Yeah, and now you can really see that AI sharpening, right? If you can read this, you're looking too close, I guess. Well, this is just gibberish. And ironically, looking is probably the only thing that's kind of sharper here. Yeah, so you can see sharpness does not equal detail. I think this is the best photo to show that off.
The Samsung's really trying hard on that sign, but struggling. Just to test this further, I tried to take a photo of this sign. And once again, when we go to 20 times, the Samsung's really trying to apply AI to the text. And in doing...
Yeah. This is where the AI will actually hurt you, right? Because you can easily take this image and afterwards like sharpen it a little bit, but because this is now not traditional sharpening, this is aggressive AI sharpening, you actually end up with less actual detail, right? Because I can actually see this says like Leicester City, Council School, Holiday Mondays. I cannot read anything but City Council School here. Like I can now from the context know that it's holiday, but like that Mondays thing is completely inexistent to me.
So it's actually making it harder to read, whereas the iPhone, I can actually read that text pretty clearly. So although extended zoom is better on the Samsung in good light...
And imagine if Apple just used like a 5% sharpener on top of this, without too much AI, or basically AI that's like as good as Metal FX or DLSS. But yeah, it's definitely still better than what Samsung was trying to do.
The iPhone is better. Now, we actually had somewhat of a moon when I was doing this test. So
yeah. This is fake, but okay.
Of course, I took some pictures of the moon. And on the iPhone, I had to tap and kind of swipe down. On the Samsung, it notices that it's the moon and it uses AI to enhance the image and it gives you a much better result. So if you like
it's also not real, but okay.
Taking pictures of the moon, go for the Samsung. Now let's take a look at portraits. I think both of these devices take excellent portraits.
Oh, wow. I guess the era of iPhones making everything too yellow is now officially over? Like, I remember like him looking substantially warmer in iPhone images before. And usually that would still kind of look good because at the very least the iPhone also could be sharper and better balanced overall. Like he now just looks like super orange here.
Here we are from the primary cameras, but the Samsung does have that dedicated 3x optical zoom camera.
No
so if
one
we do
cares.
compare portraits at 3x on both
You
devices,
should,
you'll notice
like
that
if you just want to use the best telephoto for this if you just want the best portrait for this kind of scenario, just get a little bit closer with the main sensor or use the 4X or 5X on the Galaxy. This still has downsides on the, like this overexposed on his like forehead. Like now he actually looks too pale on the Galaxy. No, that 3X is just bad. You want pictures of the moon, just use Google Maps or Google Photos. Oh, Google Images, sorry.
Samsung
I misread
has
it.
a sharper result. Although it is pretty bright, and I would say that the black on my jacket is more accurate on the iPhone. Now, the best portraits are using
Supposedly that 10 megapixel 3X is actually better. So some people are saying it's not a 1/3.9 inch sensor and not actually a 10 megapixel sensor, but supposedly it's a 1/3.2 inch sensor and a 12 megapixel sensor. But Samsung basically cuts into 10 megapixels there. And I have no idea what the justification would be unless the sensor is actually too large for the optical system, and they couldn't be bothered to adapt that optical system to the new sensor because that would have resulted in like $1 of extra cost and a little bit more time in research and development.
zoom cameras on both devices. Here we're using the 4x zoom
I
on
also
the
am
iPhone.
very sure that Samsung is looking at eliminating that 3X telephoto while probably wanting to at some point introduce variable zoom. Like if you look at the latest Xiaomi's, for example, they allow for optical zoom from 75 millimeters to 100 millimeters. So for the iPhone, it would basically be an exact match for like 3X to 4X. For the Galaxy, it would be pretty close to that. So I think Samsung is probably looking at something like that. Maybe a system that goes from like 3X to 5X, and now you can marry it with just one decent sensor rather than having two separate optical systems and things like that.
Versus the 5x zoom on the Samsung. And you can see that both are doing excellent. They've even got those wisps of my hair on the top. And both are doing good in this.
I'm not even sure. Will they need a lot of like AI processing for the portrait mode? This should be happening natural with a bokeh depth of field just from the optical system.
Example, but the edges are better on the Samsung. The
What edges? Is he still counting the edges around this like one hair? I would argue this is actually better captured on the iPhone.
iPhone has sort of missed out a bit in between my arms, and it's also made a bit of an error on the
Okay, I'll take
side
it.
of my ear. But the Samsung is brighter, and in doing so, it has clipped ever so slightly my shiny forehead.
Yep. Okay. Great. So he noticed a little bit more than me for once.
Now, I'm sure Samsung has done some work to reduce this because it is doing better compared to previous generations, but it's still not doing as good as the
I
iPhone.
also don't like some of the way it handles his beard. I feel like the sharpening here just makes the individual gray hairs stick out in a way that's not, like, I'm not saying it's bad detail, but it is kind of aesthetically unpleasing.
Phone when it comes to maintaining that dynamic range. Now, I really wanted to see which one of these has the best edge detection. So here we looked at a side profile shot just to test out my beard. Now you can see that the iPhone...
Wait, but your beard looks different here. It looks... Wait, did the Galaxy just cut off a lot of stuff here? Or wait, why is your beard like noticeably better groomed in this image?
is giving you quite a natural looking portrait where it's not cutting things out so harshly. Whereas on the Samsung, it almost looks like it's giving me a bit of a beard trim.
Yeah, exactly. Like, wait, was the beard looking actually exactly the same? And Samsung just, what, did they AI cut off those extra little hairs? Because look, that should actually be like a hair, like sticking out a little bit here.
It can look
This looks like a old pharaoh, like goatee almost.
a little bit artificial. Now for selfies, both take really good selfies.
No, the iPhone is just better. I'm sorry, man. Like, I know, like, he always says this, they're both really
And
good.
it can
But
look a
look
little
at
bit
that difference in
artificial. Now for
dynamic
selfies.
range. right? Actual dynamic range, better color handling of his skin. It depends where the sharpness was, but yeah, like the iPhone is just better
Both
here.
take really good selfies. The iPhone is wider. And for selfie portraits, once again, both do excellent.
I mean, yeah, I know you could probably tune that, but this one actually looks like a portrait shot. This one looks just like a regular shot.
With the edges. When you use portrait mode for selfies on the iPhone, it does crop in slightly, but then you can just take a regular selfie and turn it into a portrait.
You see? And that looks better too. So you don't even need to compromise. And again, that gray hair shit here. Like this one, the iPhone actually maintains that his beard overall is black. I assume it's dyed, right? But then the individual gray hairs are here. But on the Galaxy, the gray starts to visually bleed out into the rest of the black. Feeling proud to be a 17 Pro Max owner right now? Yeah, you haven't even watched the Max Tag video, which I won't be watching today because it's getting quite late.
Does the job fine, and it maintains that wider angle.
Maybe
view.
tomorrow.
Low light selfies, both try to use a longer shutter speed.
I mean, the iPhone actually looks usable. Neither is great, but the iPhone is actually usable for once, which in previous years and still on the Galaxy, I would argue, no, the 99% of flagships actually don't do usable night selfies.
Which doesn't really work in my experience. Here, I do think that the iPhone is doing better. And we can use the selfie flash on both devices where it illuminates the screen, and these are the results. Now, one advantage...
Wait, was that the moon in the background? Wait, did it...
And we can use...
Did it create a moon? Also, okay, this is a different background. Okay, I was a little bit...
The selfie flash on both devices where it illuminates the screen, and these are the results. Now, one advantage for selfies that the iPhone has is that it has a new square sensor.
Yep.
What Apple call a center stage camera. And this means that...
It's actually not true. They call center stage the fact that it's ultra wide. That's what they refer to. And the fact that it would basically be able to follow you if you like come out of frame, into frame and stuff like that. But I understand the point.
You can take both portrait and landscape images without having to rotate your phone, and this works really well. Now, before we move to video, we have to talk about the AI features that Samsung offers because they are some of the best out there. Now, you might already know that...
I know, guys. I know. This will look like I'm super biased against Samsung. I do not care about AI editing features. If I want to edit an image, I have fucking Pixelmator Pro on my iPad. Like this, I don't give a fuck. I really don't. Like, and especially if I want to use stuff like that, I'll just use my Perplexity Pro subscription.
Result close, lots of detail, both are frames a second. Let's take a look at the iPhone simply can't do. Right now, let's take a look at the video.
The Galaxy doesn't do it either. It relies on the cloud. It's just integrated into the Photos app. By the way, like Image Playground even features like ChatGPT integration if you really wanted to.
Okay, 30 frames a second in good light. Both are excellent. You've got lots of detail.
Which I know Image Playground won't do those things, but still.
Range was also close. Even shooting in HDR, both did a great job, but when I exported
okay, this is now gonna suffer a little bit. Whenever you shoot HDR and then export to SDR, I'm not gonna hold dynamic range against either one here. I mean, the sharpness is very clearly better on the iPhone. I don't know. I think the focus...
HDR video out front.
Yeah, the focus was just too slow. This is also one thing that has been better. Not just the stabilization, but the focus on iPhones has been super duper fast over the last couple of years. Whether it's the focus pixels or the image signal processor, but yeah, it works.
The Samsung, then it did add a bit of a blue tint. I mean, there was really no blue on the day that I was filming.
Okay,
but for low light,
you see, and that's something that you would have thought even maybe the iPhone makes it too yellowish or too greenish.
I consistently found that the iPhone was sharper with cleaner overall video, as you can see from the examples here. However, because of the new lenses on the Samsung, although there is some lens flare, there is nowhere as much compared.
I agree. This is something that Apple definitely needs to work on. I 100% acknowledge
to those
this.
lens flare orbs.
We are getting a real optical reimagining with the iPhone 18 Pro Max. We're getting a wider aperture and a variable aperture, and with that probably will come a difference in like exact like how many lenses they have and things like that. So hopefully they work a little bit more on the lens flares here.
iPhone. The Samsung can also shoot at 8K from the ultra wide.
And the 8K doesn't look better, right? Like, this is one thing that I always hear like tech reviewers bring up. Well, it can shoot 8K, but then my question is, well, is the 8K actually sharper than a well-maintained 4K on the iPhone? And the answer is basically universally no. Plus, the 8K is of course limited to 30 frames per second.
Primary as well.
Also, it usually does worse HDR.
Telephoto cameras, and this gives you so much more detail. It
Where? Show me the detail. It looks soft as fuck.
also allows you the ability to crop into your subject after the fact.
You can crop in 4K. Believe me, it will look still decent if you have like a high enough like encoder.
Now for stabilization, this was very interesting because at 4K without any special modes, both are very, very close. Comparing action mode to super steady, once again, things are very close. Both of these have excellent stabilization. But the Samsung has a new trick up its sleeve.
Yeah, a trick that's limited to 1080p 30.
And that's super steady with horizontal log. Now, this feature isn't really for action shots or anything like that.
No.
It's more to keep your shot steady. And if you're somebody with unsteady hands, or if you're going to be passing your phone to somebody that can't really keep the camera straight and is going to be going from side to side, this is going to be amazing. Check out this example. Moving side to side on the iPhone, you can see the result, but on the Samsung, it looks like I haven't moved at all. And you can actually do
Yeah, so the things it does basically is it just crops in on a huge part, it crops in hugely on a small part of the sensor. That's why it's limited to 1080p. It reserves some processing. That's why it's 30 FPS. It's very
full
different.
360, and it's still going to maintain that horizontal lock.
Yeah, I mean, that's just correcting the image at that point if it's locked into that view.
Which is absolutely mind-blowing. I also found that the Samsung was more stable from the selfie camera, which was a bit of a surprise to me because traditionally the iPhone has been more stable from the selfie camera. But
interesting. I mean, I don't run around with my selfie camera.
Testing this time, the Samsung was. But the iPhone is wider from that selfie camera, and it was a bit
and sharper, and has better color reproduction and everything basically.
sharper. Now for cinematic video.
This is why I'm really excited if Apple actually gives us the full 24 megapixels of that sensor, potentially doing even wider. That would actually be great for stabilization tricks and things like that. But if Apple does give us 24 megapixel without changing the actual like focal length, that would mean just more sharpness, which would be insane.
Saw the example on the intro. Neither of these were perfect and both did a decent job overall. But on the iPhone, you can change the point of focus.
Again, this is where the ISP is really so much more capable on the iPhone. It's so much better optimized with its software stack.
And also edit
like this is detail like other Android phones do have like, oh, you can capture it and make it a portrait mode afterwards. But the iPhone actually is very selective about that. It doesn't just give you like, oh, here's an AI take on what a portrait mode of this photo would look like. No, it actually like reworks that image with the depth data that it gathers, right? With spatial stuff, that's what that depth data is for. Obviously, if it can use for spatial videos, obviously it can use for portrait mode photos, because spatial video is or cinematic video, whatever. It's basic. Yeah, sure. Cinematic is not spatial. I apologize for cinema. Wait, did he call that cinematic here? Yeah. Wait, which one is it? Because he calls it cinematic here. Oh, okay. So, okay, that's true. Cinematic. And then spatial is for virtual reality stuff.
Something that you can't do on the Samsung. Both devices can shoot in log, so this will give you a flat picture profile, which you can edit afterwards. The S26 Ultra also has a new APV video format that you can record to, and this is a lossless format, which will let you edit over and over again without losing quality. And the S26 Ultra...
Wait. Did he not mention ProRes on the iPhone? The iPhone was so much earlier to like a lossless codec, or even it doesn't even force you to shoot lossless, which is really difficult then at that point in terms of data files and stuff like that. You can shoot like ProRes 422 and stuff like that. Riley saying, gonna go watch my boy Drew cook with his new videos. Wait, what? Did Tailosive Tech post something interesting? Tailosive Tech. What did he post? iPhone 17e still has notch, but 256 gigs base. It's a 5-minute, 33-second video. Okay, so I doubt that there are any either great takes or takes that are so spicy that I need to react to
built
it.
in, so you can really customize your settings like your ISO, your white balance, right within the camera app. You're not going to have to get a third-party app. On the iPhone, you would have to get a third-party app if you want this
Wait, has he really forgotten ProRes video on the
level
iPhone?
of control. For slow motion,
Yeah, he really forgot to mention ProRes. That's crazy. iPhone was first with a high quality codec. The fuck, man.
shoots at 4K 120 frames a second, and I think both do a good job overall.
Riley just chatted for the first time in what feels like an hour, and he's again the #1 chatter.
Well, on
That's
the S26
crazy.
Ultra, you can have 4K 120 frames
And
a second. from the
KSB
ultra-wide
Wonders now
camera. This is
overtaking
not
him
available on
with the
iPhone.
last
However,
chat.
on the iPhone, you can choose 2x zoom when shooting 4K 120 frames a second slow motion. You can't do this on the Samsung. Now for audio. So on the Samsung, you can
Oh,
clear
yeah, I think that's what I saw online. Because, again, no pre-watch here on this video. I partially pre-watched the MaxTag video, but then again, I'm not going to be reacting to that today. I do need to eat something.
background noise with audio eraser. On the iPhone, you have something called Audio Mix, and it gives you 3 options: in frame, studio, and cinematic. To me, in this
Wait, no, it gives you 4 options on top of standard.
example, in frame sounded best, and here it is versus audio eraser.
Wait, what about standard?
So now we've got audio mix versus audio eraser on
Okay, they both sound like complete garbage.
the S26 Ultra.
Yeah, this sounds like he's garbling some metal, and this sounds like he's an AI robot.
Let's see which one of these can cancel out all of the background noise that we've got, especially that Alfred.
Now, whichever one I pick for audio always seems to annoy people because
Riley saying next time I'm commenting 3 hours before the live. I'm not sure if I'll be setting up the live 3 hours before, because I do want to set up lives that actually match the topic, which today I was actually like frantically creating my thumbnail and everything. That's why I don't have myself in the thumbnail, even though it was actually a goal of mine to put myself back into my own thumbnails. Maybe I'll actually do that afterwards for this thumbnail, like retrospectively, just do it like this.
So I'll leave it to you guys. Let me know down in the comments below which one of these sounds better. And that is the Super SAS style camera comparison.
Yeah, okay. I don't need his. I do not need his lukewarm. Like, oh, they're both good. It depends on your thing. I have to say, like, don't forget, the iPhone is now half a year old. The Galaxy S26 Ultra launched a month later in the year than the S25 Ultra did, right? The iPhone is 100 gigabytes cheaper for the same amount of storage and RAM. So that's something that actually used to be at least somewhat in favor in Samsung. Like, they used to have either more storage, more RAM, or in many cases both, sometimes substantially. For the base model, that does simply not apply anymore, which means I believe Samsung's upgrades are a little bit cheaper, but then again, because of the different base price, it kind of evens out. Plus, the iPhone offers a 2 terabyte version. Now, I do know the iPhone's prices by heart, obviously. It's $11.99, it's $13.99, and it's $17.99 in the US. Samsung.com, which means, of course, it will immediately open up the German website of Samsung. Or for some reason not open anything at all. Of course, it opened the German website because God forbid .com actually means I want the English website. Give me North America. Let's ignore any kind of early order discounts, because by that logic, you could also say, well, the iPhone has more carrier deals at this point, right? Yeah, $12.99. Oh, $14.99. Okay, so the 1 terabyte model is where it evens out, because the iPhone asks. Wait, no, the iPhone. Wait, no, the iPhone is cheaper than here again across the board. Wait, are they asking $300 to go from 512 gigabytes to 1 terabyte of storage? Are they actually asking more money than Apple? Because Apple asks $200 for 256 to 512, but then they kind of make it up to you by only asking $200 to go from Oh my God. This is $200 cheaper now. This is actually crazy pants stuff. You know what? I'm actually going to screenshot this. uh, I mean, it doesn't show that it's the iPhone, right? But I guess it should be clear from the website then. Capture. And then the Galaxy. Or where was it? Here, right? I can take a screenshot here. That's insane. That's immediately like Discord post worthy. But I'm going to post it afterwards because I do have to wrap this up. This is actually insane. Like, now, I know this is UFS 4.1, so the storage here on the Galaxy is a little bit faster, but it's not faster enough to justify this. This is crazy. I actually didn't know. My brain corrected that because if you look at the iPhone, of course, right, you have the 2 terabyte version for $19.99, which is objectively just a better value than the $17.99 1 terabyte Galaxy S26 Ultra. I definitely did not expect that. So I guess there's always something left to learn, no matter what. But yeah, that should be about it. Let me check if I've missed anything. Maybe. Oh, we got iPadOS and iOS 26.4. Report, Apple asked Google to run Siri on its servers. Okay, so there's a little bit of story stuff. I guess I can finish with that. Why not convert some clips of your stream into shorts? Yes, you're like KSB, you don't know how correct you are. I just don't know what to pick. It always feels like, because I talk for such a long time, it always feels if I make like a 30-second clip out of something, it's just too short. What I might do tomorrow, because the sun is finally shining, maybe I'll just walk out the door super early and then I'll make like a 30-second or a 1 minute short explaining my thoughts on today's launches or something like that. This is why, by the way, sometimes I take like $5 and connect like ad and I turn like a stream into an ad. It adds like 200 viewers or whatever overall, but like sometimes I just want to extend the reach, but it's so hard because I struggle with shorts. And you guys know I used to do like regular videos, but I used to prepare a script for them, and then I would kind of read it out for like 15 minutes. And basically the video would be a stream, but I would cut off that initial portion and turn it into a separate 15-minute video. So yeah, the pricing fine is a short worthy. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, like my other contempt actually speaks so much volume. Okay, so Apple has reportedly suffered from a cultural reluctance to. Okay, at the time, for years, the issue has been Apple now wants to be prepared for potential search and AI use on its devices when the more powerful Gemini-based version. Yeah, that is. Yeah, Mark Gurman pretty much already alluded to that. That's nothing new. Guys, again, streaming over 3 hours. If you're watching this and you are somehow new to the stream and you're enjoying this, maybe you're watching this as a VOD afterwards, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. If you're actually live, send me a hi in the live chat or send me a super chat. I'll notice you either way. And consider becoming a channel member right here on YouTube. Once again, shout out to all our MarkCheck Pro Max members. So we do get new betas. These are all features that were introduced like last time. So I guess there is nothing new. But I mean, we can talk about it tomorrow, right? That's like by that point, the likes of Zolotech and other iOS version YouTubers will have made full videos breaking it all down and things like that. If you're part, okay, so I'll install the betas a little bit after chatting with a friend, because I do have kind of an appointment afterwards, at least online. Thank you guys. This was actually super fun and my longest stream in quite a while, and definitely my most lively stream in quite a while. Hopefully whatever happens tomorrow is similarly like stuffed. Like we could get the base iPad model, we could get the cheap MacBook, which could be either A18 Pro or A19 Pro based. Hell knows, we could get an Apple TV A17 Pro or A18 based. We could get a HomePod Mini, but that's really up in the air. I think it's probably only going to launch once we actually get new Siri. Beyond all that, well, M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pro, I kind of still would be more in line. M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pro tomorrow, and cheaper MacBook actually on Wednesday. Riley saying no 3.1 update. Oh, yeah, 26.3.1. Well, they still have time. All the devices that they launched are only coming out next week. So they could launch it by like Thursday if they really wanted to, or they could launch it alongside the public beta for 26.4. Right? I don't think that's too crazy. And we got Big Mark, exactly, Riley. Just for your personal viewing pleasure, right at the end. Look, I even like did my eyebrows a little bit for you guys. Yeah, this was super fun, and there's still a lot to look forward to this week, and I'll definitely try to manage my work and everything schedule. So thank you so much. This was super duper fun. You guys know the drill for any kind of support. I mentioned that multiple times throughout the stream. I see Riley overtook KSP Wonders just at the very end, and KSB is now frantically adding some chats to be number one, but I guess he just cannot win against the incumbent advantage of Riley, because Riley has been with the stream for way longer. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you soon. Oh, my Mac actually changed into dark mode, but you cannot see that because I'm in Big Mark mode. So I guess the sun did set, which means it's time for me to go howl at the moon, which I'll probably need the Galaxy S26 Ultra to zoom into it so I can actually see the moon, because otherwise, how would I know it's there? I'll see you guys soon. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.